I concur with staff's recommendation because I don't really have the time either. So I'm good with staff recommendation.
And Mark, we appreciate that. And I think it's worth just touching on, and not Mark to at all pick on your request, but just to check in with the board and make sure that we're on the right track as staff, which is we view your time as very valuable. You are and has historically, this board has determined and operated in a way that is a policy level board, hiring staff who hopefully you consider professional and capable, and that we execute your policies, but that you're really establishing the policies. Having a director potentially represent the district in a series of 2 years of public meetings would be an unusual situation for a policy level board. And so just want to confirm with the board that we're approaching that right, and that we're not, we do, all work for you and you tell us what to do, but we're just wanted to make sure we're operating consistently.
I think that's a great clarification, and I don't know the new directors if you have any questions on that. And I think it's really helpful when something like that comes up, when the staff can talk to the board and say, hey, this looks like it's maybe crossing the line and let's figure it out. So, Director Munger.
So I guess I have a question for staff, Andy. So we'd asked to do the same thing on the Little Snake River Reservoir up there. It was going to be the Tool was championing,
Right.
And so we haven't heard anything more. Is anything happening?
Nothing's been happening. So we are a cooperating agency on that, I forget the name of the
Director
reservoir.
Gray and I
Yeah,
asked.
Battle Creek, right, whatever.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we are a cooperating agency on that. We're a cooperating agency on the White River Storage Project at the direction of the board. And that is, then staff is we have staff members assigned to each of those. We can provide an update. Right now, there's nothing on the Battle Creek.
I think it's Battle Creek, yeah.
There's nothing that I'm aware of to report. I personally end up talking to Pat about it frequently.
He calls them.
He calls. Yeah, and he's really at this point a little frustrated trying to get state of Colorado support for that. And it does not appear that this administration is interested in supporting the reservoir project of that nature. And that's really where his frustration lies.
So and I appreciate, and I guess I'll continue on, Madam Chair, just quickly. So I don't mind, like Director Gray and I can participate in those things. I don't think we need to devote a lot of staff time to it until we need to. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate Director Rober, we kind of want to be at the table for these things and not encumber a lot of staff time on it as well. So, but anyhow, my thoughts.
Director Thomas.
No, I think any director is welcome to participate in any public process that they want to on behalf of their cattlemen's association or whatever that might be. And I think it's good to bring that information back to the board if you have something to share, but agree that maybe those kind of things, especially when you're a cooperating agency, the expectation is pretty high in terms of what you're going to give back to be a part of that. And so, yeah.
Great.
So you need a motion on that, or?
We don't.
Okay.
This was really a generic. All right, thank you. I appreciate that. The waters of the United States, Rebecca is right here. Wow. Rebecca's commute in from Rifle is a little lengthy at times, so thank you, Rebecca. Excellent time. And so
What page are we on?
we're on page 402 of 512 on PDF. All right.
Stephanie, can I share my screen? Do I have to join the
You have
Zoom?
to join the Zoom.
And take a breath.
I have a PowerPoint. If that's. Okay, I'll do that.
Rebecca, if you'd like, I can take the next item. Let me take. the next
Okay,
item.
go for it. That would be great.
You're getting like- The next item is the general manager's goals and objectives. You'll note, I try to keep them pared down. There's a whole lot more that goes on in the district that I'm involved in, but trying to keep some pretty simple general goals. I will just say it's an interesting one. These are not ranked in any priority, frankly, from my perspective. But the one that is listed as number one has to do with Shoshone. And in my first year, 6 years ago, I left it off of my goals. And the Gunnison County representative at the time, Bill Trampy, was kind enough to tell me to ask me where the hell that goal was and would you please put it on there? So it's now on there. It's been on there. But I think they do change as things develop, and luckily we're making a lot of progress on a number of these issues, so they have modified. But if the board has questions or desires a different focus from me, I'd love to hear about it. So happy to do that.
Questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
Appreciate goal number 4, outreach to all basins. I think that's big, especially on the funding partnership. Obviously there's been a lot of projects in some areas and not so much in others, but that word of mouth and seeing you and hearing from staff and hearing about other projects for our water users in Uray County, I think is really important to kind of get them to understand the funding opportunities that are there and to kick off some good projects. So
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. And I this will come up in our external affairs discussion here in a minute, but I will just say one of the things we're focused on with the upcoming State of the River series this year is in our outlying and basins, the Gunnison and the Yampa White Green is really focusing more on the CFP and the opportunity there because of the consolidation of funding on Shoshone kind of shuts down the main stem funding in order to get the balance that we're looking for in geographic funding. So we are trying to emphasize the availability of funds for the Gunnison and the Yampa White Green. So we're going to have our CFP team very active in those states of the river and in other events throughout the year to try to do exactly what you're talking about, which is stimulate interest in the program and make sure people are aware of it. And frankly, help drive priorities of the district in those areas. So.
Right. By the way, about a dozen years ago, the Uray County representative was Connie Parrott in that same.
Yeah, he said that stuff all the time.
yeah. It's a little quiet down there.
Yeah.
Great. I guess I have a question. These are really big goals and you've beefed up staff in some areas at the board's request and have some amazing team members. Do you feel like the district is staffed appropriately to help you meet those goals?
Yeah, I mean, I think that our staff is amazingly professional and efficient right now, and I will say that greatly appreciate the 3 additional positions that the board authorized last year. I might say over my initial objection, but really do appreciate having the extra staff, and it has been really nice to be able to kind of spread that load and get some work out faster than would have happened otherwise. One of the things we are doing, and you'll note for the Shoshone example, and when Zane talks about just our involvement at the state level, we are utilizing contractors to help leverage the staff resources. And so it's not just about the number of people on staff. We are looking at opportunities through contractors to help make get our work done and get it done as efficiently and quickly as we can. You know, whether it's the interstate work that we do with hydros and modeling, we have looked at bringing that kind of talent in-house and determined that it's more efficient to have it out there as a contractor. Our lobbyists at the state, Zane is our primary government affairs contact, but we have 2 contract lobbyists who are on what we would generally call eyes and ears contracts that help us on both sides of the aisle, pay attention to what's going on down there and make sure we're as effective as we can. The Shoshone deal, you know, GBSM, we've also got Hydros doing work on it. We have BBA doing work on it. I'm in the middle of talking to an economics firm to help us with some work from the Bureau of Reclamation's funding on that effort. So we are leveraging our staff to, you know, through contractors, and I think our staff is absolutely the best staff I'm familiar with throughout the entire water industry in Western United States. They are top-notch, high quality, and really want to thank the board for allowing us to hire and retain staff and be, you know, a leader, as Audrey was describing yesterday. But really provide an environment where the staff like this thrives. So I think we're doing great.
Thanks for that.
And you guys can all disagree with me.
Director Munger.
So the thing that's been kind of burning at me a little bit, you know, we have water both in Elkhead, and you have water in Roaring Fork as well. We have water, uncommitted water in Stagecoach. We have like tons of water in Stagecoach that's non-committed. And when we have in these discussions about, you know, providing in-stream flows and providing water for the compact, you know, delivery. Somehow, I don't know how we can figure out how we can get paid some money. River District and the Upper Yampa get paid for delivering some of our water out of storage and potentially increasing the in-stream flow habitats and the rest for the environmental purposes and just putting more water in the river. We can't just turn out water just to turn out water, because then we have problem refilling with our water rights and the rest. So I just think that there's a huge unmet opportunity here that we kind of, I mean, when we had our conversation yesterday about the drought task force and the power plants water, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to make some water, some money with water.
I would agree that you know, the in-channel use of our water is an asset that we need to monetize. And I will say, the board authorized that 6 years ago for the first time at the district. And we have, and you'll see a discussion on water marketing coming up here in a little bit today, where we talk about where our growth sector has been in the last 6 years, and it's all been in-channel.
Absolutely.
And we have actually made money and continue to make money off those in-channel uses. I would just caution you on the interstate issue.
Okay, well, that's why I brought it
Yeah.
up. You can caution.
I will caution you. I think in order to be effective from a compact compliance perspective, you'd have to release it and then not refill your reservoir for about 10 years under a rolling 10-year average to make sure that you're, if you release it in 1 year and then refill it, you've done nothing to help the compact.
Oh,
And you may help the streams, and I'm not opposed to that, and get paid for it, but I think that if you have to leave your reservoir empty for the next 10 years so that you don't.
yeah, no, that's not what we would want to do.
Okay.
I think what Doug's talking about, we've been talking about, is an opportunity for the Colorado's water and fire appropriation doctrine, whatever you want
Yeah.
to say, to be amended, because I've seen blatant instances to where there was considerable pre-compact water conservation that could have been used within the state, but yet it went right on down the river and never got any accounted for. There's no reason that water can't be put away into storage or exchanged. And that is not a concept in this state right. And to me, there's no reason it shouldn't. And I point out in September that we had 18 inches of snow in our White River Basin that they stopped irrigating for 4 weeks. And they still got a problem.
Anything
Sorry to
else on
take
the-
you off task.
Welcome, Peter, we're glad you made it in.
Apologies.
That's all right. Yeah, Director Green.
Well, just related to that, one of the things I remember, I can't remember the bill number, but the CWCB loan program, when that was modified last, several of us tried to get a requirement that they had to approach storage, owners of storage water, and if it was available to be released from storage, we're talking about intrastate uses for the stream uses. If it was available from and the storage owner wanted to lease it, they had to do that first. We didn't get that definitive language, but we did get language in the bill, and it's in the management, in the rulemaking that the CWCB did on their program, which says they should contact and lease water from storage first before they go out trying to lease it off the ground. Plus, it's cheaper normally. And I don't know if they're actually doing that, if anybody's paying attention, but
That's a good question. Zane, do you have any updates on that?
I'm racking my brain. I seem to remember that we did get the stored water preference for the program.
But should not shall.
should not shall.
And I'm happy to chat with you offline. Ways to approach it.
See if we are aware of any examples of that.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll go turn back to Rebecca. You ready?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, directors, for being patient with me. I apologize, the commute was a little bit rough this morning. But I'm here today to talk about waters of the US and some of the changes that have been happening in that federal landscape, and then what the next steps are for Colorado in addressing some of those changes. Next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of background, which some of you may be pretty aware of, Waters of the US stands for, or WOTUS is the short term, is Waters of the US, including the territorial seas. And through the Clean Water Act of 1972, the EPA and the US Army Corps of Engineers are tasked with protecting these navigable waters, otherwise known as WOTUS. And in the Act of 1972, it did not further define what WOTUS meant or where that jurisdiction stops. And that definition has been left to the Army Corps of Engineers and the EPA to determine where that jurisdiction is. And generally, these protections are administered through the EPA and the US Army Corps of Engineers, although states and tribes are authorized to assume administration of these permit programs if interested. And if you click one more time, Stephanie. So there's two kind of sections to focus on here. Section 402 in the Clean Water Act establishes a permit program for point source discharges. So anything that's coming out of a pipe, easily measurable. For example, an industry that has a pipe that's discharging water with perhaps some pollutants, they would get a permit through Section 402 to have that discharge into WOTUS. Within Colorado, that is administered by the state, not by a federal program. And it is through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. And this has been administered through that department for a number of years. Section 404, which is what we're going to talk about and focus on today, establishes a program to regulate discharge of dredge and fill materials into WOTUS. And this is administered in Colorado through the Army Corps of Engineers, not through the state. And in most states, it is administered through the Army Corps. It's fairly rare to be administered through a state. Go ahead and click one more time. An important kind of note before we move forward is there are exemptions within this permit program. So for example, if you need to get a 404 permit for discharging dredge and fill, these are exemptions that you would not have to get a permit for. And that includes maintenance of drainage ditches, established ongoing farming activities such as plowing, seeding, or minor drainage, construction and maintenance of irrigation ditches, construction and maintenance of farm and forest roads, maintenance of structures such as dams, dikes, and levees, and construction and maintenance of farm or stock ponds. So these are exemptions that have been in the Section 404 permit program for a long time and are very established exemptions for not moving a dredge and permit. Well, click next slide, please. So, I said here that kind of defining that jurisdiction has been left to the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. In the past 20 or so years, it's been a bit of a political football on where that jurisdiction ends and where it begins. And so it's been more kind of bounced back and forth between presidential administrations and court cases. And it's been changing frequently, I would say. Where the political landscape has kind of fallen back on in the past 20 years when anything is overturned is guidance that was established in 2008 in the Rapinos versus United States Supreme Court case, in which Justice Kennedy defined the significant nexus test. And when we talk about where kind of some of this conflict of jurisdiction lies, it's generally in kind of these nebulous hydrology zones, including wetlands, is what you generally do. And so Justice Kennedy described a significant nexus that was determined on a case-by-case basis for jurisdictional determination of wetlands. Basically, that if wetlands or another potential water body alone or in combination with similarly situated lands in the region significantly affects the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of traditional navigable waters. So for example, if a wetland is connected to a traditionally navigable water stream or potentially a lake by groundwater or connected in some other way, it could be determined that it is jurisdictional and would require a Section 404 permit for dredge and fill activities. The other kind of important definition to define here is adjacent. Under the 2008 Rapinos guidance, adjacent meant bordering, contiguous, or neighboring. However, if it was separated by a man-made structure such as a berm or a levee, a dike, something like that, it could still be considered adjacent and jurisdictional. Next slide, please.
Madam Chair, got a question.
Sorry.
In terms of navigable waters within the state, when the state became a state, the Constitution, the state Constitution said there were no navigable waters within the state of Colorado. How does this play out that way?
Well, there's questions as to navigate, and I can't even say it. Title versus authority to regulate. And I can't recall off the top of my head that specific distinction, but that comes into play with respect to the access to land or the access to water, land underlying waters issue, talking about title as opposed to the ability to regulate.
Interesting.
And so just to put a little picture to this on what would be jurisdictional under that 2008 guidance that was established, traditionally navigable waters, so kind of that main waterway through that drainage. Other waters, which would be defined as lakes and ponds, but again, not stock ponds, those are an exemption. Tributaries that have a significant nexus to a traditional navigable water or the other waters. Relatively permanent tributaries. Wetlands, if they are adjacent to or have a significant nexus to these traditional waters or other waters. And then ditches is kind of a weird ground. We're not gonna really focus on that because it's not so pertinent for today. But ditches could potentially be if they're affected by interstate commerce. And you can go to the next slide. So as you guys are probably aware, this changed significantly in May of 2023 last year in the Sackett versus EPA Supreme Court case, where the majority opinion, really changed the definition of what WOTUS is and the scope of where that jurisdiction applies. And so in the majority opinion, it was written that the Clean Water Act extends to only those wetlands that are, as a practical matter, indistinguishable from waters of the United States, and that wetlands must have a continuous surface connection with waters of the US, making it difficult to determine where the water ends and the wetlands begin. If you click one more time, Stephanie. And so later in 2003 or 2023, excuse me, in September approximately, the Army Corps of Engineers came out with the conforming rule to establish their guidance to conform with what the Supreme Court had established. And so they removed that significant nexus test, which had been in place, and they amended that definition of adjacent. So that instead of just having it can be adjacent, it must have a continuous surface connection, meaning that if it's separated by a road or a berm or another man-made structure, even if it's adjacent, it is not connected, does not have the continuous surface connection, and may not be jurisdictional. And they also removed interstate wetlands, which basically means that wetlands cannot be jurisdictional simply because they are interstate. They must have a continuous surface connection. Click one more time, Steph. So just to kind of look back at that picture, I think it is a case by case basis. So it really depends on the specific water body. You can't necessarily say for sure, but to look at this is would give us an idea of what may not be jurisdictional under this new definition. An isolated wetland on the left side there, the significant nexus test being gone, does not have a continuous surface connection, would be unlikely to be jurisdictional. The wetland on a relatively permanent tributary and the relatively permanent tributary not having continuous flow of water would likely not be jurisdictional. And a wetland separated by a berm, again, the adjacent definition does not apply, so would likely not be jurisdictional. You can click again. So kind of focusing in on Colorado and the response in Colorado. Colorado defines waters a little bit differently. Within the state waters are defined as any and all surface and subsurface waters which are contained in or flow in or through the state, which of course is a lot broader than the waters of the US definition. And especially now that that has been redefined, this is much broader. And so if you click again, Stephanie, so the states determined that, if you look at the blue circle on the left, that's state waters, all of the waters that flow in or through the state. And in that middle circle, you can see the green are state waters that were considered also waters of the US and were under federal jurisdiction prior to the Sackett decision. And then in the yellow circle on the far right, those are the waters that are now considered federal jurisdiction, leaving kind of this green gap there, which are Sackett gap waters, is what the state is defining as Sackett gap waters, waters that prior to Sackett were jurisdictional on a federal landscape, but are now no longer jurisdictional. And I would say that the state would like to keep under jurisdiction for Section 404 permits. Next slide, please. So in kind of response to this and really in anticipation, because it was released in May about the same time that the Sackett decision came out, the state was looking to address these Sackett gap waters and provide the same level of protection for them as, was in place prior to the Sackett decision. And so they released the Colorado division, the Water Quality Control Division, which is housed under the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, released an enforcement of unpermanent dredged and fill material into state waters policy. We did comment on this policy. I think that letter is provided in your packet, and they finalized it after that draft form. But essentially this was developed to preserve, again, the pre-Sackett level of protection as a temporary policy while the state takes the next steps to come up with a permanent regulatory solution. So it's not meant to be a federal permit or a formal permit program, and it is not meant to be permanent. It is meant to be temporary. But essentially it was saying that the division intends to have enforcement discretion with these Section 404 activities, as long as the people doing these activities inform the division of what they're doing and put in some best management practices and do things in a way that would, be advised if you had a permit anyways. And again, they do kind of request notification of all dredge and fill activities, not just ones that would of course need a permit. And then they did include the exemptions as outlined in the Clean Water Act, which was important for us, and I think for a lot of people, that those exemptions for irrigation ditches for farming activities continue. Go to the next slide, Stephanie. So to look at the next steps, this is a high priority item for the state of Colorado right now for the governor's office. So after that release of the division's temporary enforcement policy in May last year, there was a series of stakeholder, or at least a little bit of stakeholder engagement. And prior to this, I will say there was a task force that Jason Turner served on that was active prior to the release of the division's enforcement policy to look at how to address this upcoming Sackett Gap water, I don't want to say issue, but something to address. And so in this summer, the governor's office, in conjunction with the Division of Water Resources, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and others, put on a stakeholder engagement session where they listened to people from agriculture and industry, water providers, a whole spectrum of people involved in this, to get their opinions on what the state of Colorado should do to address Sackett Gap waters, and what this could look like. And also, I think, to hear, frustrations that existed with the Section 404 permit program, how they could address those frustrations and make something potentially better that works more effectively for Colorado. And so what we're going to probably see is in this 2024 Colorado General Assembly, again, this is probably a very high priority item, especially in the water landscape. We're likely to see legislation that establishes a permit program administered through Colorado for these Section 404 permits addressing Sackett Gap waters. It's unknown at this time if it's going to be focused on all state waters, or if it's only going to look at Sackett Gap waters, and how that's going to be developed, but this is probably going to be a pretty lengthy and potentially contentious kind of back and forth development of some legislation. And if you click one more time, Stephanie, I just want to highlight two taking place in the stakeholder session this summer, and what I've heard from stakeholders involved in this process, to kind of give you an idea of what the state is hearing as well. Maintaining the existing protections and not expanding the protections is a really big priority, I would say, for most stakeholders. I think there are exceptions, but in general, I think stakeholders are interested in keeping that level that existed prior to Sackett, but they aren't interested in seeing anything more than that. And they are, of course, interested in maintaining the existing exemptions. And there was actually a lot of calls to expand and clarify those exemptions. For example, in the exemptions, it says there's an exemption for irrigation ditches, but it's a little bit vague as to whether that exemption is only for irrigation ditches in agriculture, or whether it applies to irrigation ditches for an HOA, or for a golf course, or for something else. And so I think there is kind of this idea that this could be an opportunity for Colorado to make something that really works for the realities of Colorado, was a theme that I heard in the stakeholder session. People are interested in establishing a clear scope. I think there's been a lot of frustration with not knowing whether a water body is jurisdictional, and really kind of some of that ambiguity is I think stakeholders are hoping to have some of that solved. And then there has been some other suggestions on, limiting permit delays and costs, and then complementing federal programs without duplicating them. So that's some of the stakeholder feedback that I've been hearing from this session. Moving forward, we haven't seen really this draft language for any framework yet. There is going to be a session on Tuesday next week that Zane and I are planning on attending to hear a proposal in place. So we will learn more and certainly keep you updated. But I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Rebecca? Yeah, Director.
So yeah, you just opened up a whole can of worms here. my flags went up and things, so, yeah, you talk about the irrigation ditches weren't covered, and yet we have an irrigation ditch that services the town of Hayden. And the question was that, well, whether that irrigation ditch is still exempt or whatever. I guess my question, though, I'll get back to my question though, is, so you've been participating in the stakeholder meetings and they've been undertaken by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment through the Water Quality Control Division, is that correct?
So it was a collection. It was led by the governor's office, and then there were the Department of Agriculture, Division of Water Resources. It was.
So they have a committee that was working on this, or, I mean, how come, so the Department of Ag's been involved in it, has Colorado Cattlemen been involved in this thing, and the rest of us flunkies out here that living in this thing?
I would imagine that they were at the stakeholder session. It was an all-day stakeholder session, and I was there for one of the sessions. They essentially set up about 5 sessions throughout the day and kind of tried to focus them on different stakeholder groups. So there was one specific to agriculture. There was one specific to water providers. I'm missing which one I attended, but yeah, I would imagine that.
Construction and the rest?
I think so, yeah. And Jason has this on that.
Yeah, I participated in the task force and there were representatives from industry, the construction industry. I don't remember whether Colorado County was there, but Farm Bureau certainly was.
Great.
Pretty diverse group.
Okay, well, thank you, so, yeah. I always get really concerned when we start making rules and we're not at the table, so. Us
And
people that actually live it, you know?
No, I will say there were no rules made there. It was just basically sort of a think tank with regards to how this would play in Colorado, the concerns that all these various groups would have with, because we went from everything from the state taking total jurisdiction over everything and doing their own permitting system, to whether we were going to just include these gap waters. So it was essentially really a round robin of people's concerns and considerations going forward, and to basically advise the state on perhaps where we all thought they shouldn't go, with regards to this.
So was this talked about at the legislature, water committee?
I've got some questions myself.
Okay, I'll defer to Director Catlin, thank you.
First off, I'd like to know how they noticed those meetings. Do you know?
I do not, other than we were asked to be a participant and I showed up.
That's really getting at. Seems like it was an invitation, which would concern me. Folks that are always testifying. Those of us from here, we don't get there. Because, we weren't told. Those things concern me. I worry about the state stepping into this on this new stage, thinking that they've got the expertise really to figure it out. I don't think they do. It concerns me when they start talking about whether or not that ditch is an ag ditch, or, categorizing water in a ditch seems to me to be out of the scope. My irrigation is not more valuable than your town's irrigation. Your maintenance of that ditch is no more valuable than me maintaining drain ditches and those kind of things. And in the Uncompahgre, drain ditches is how we live. When they built the system, it was for irrigation. And then all of a sudden they realized, oh, hell, we have to be a drainage district. And those drain ditches have been maintained now for over, almost 100 years. So this idea is concerning to me, and I've tried to talk to CDPHE, and I guess I never get the right guy. Because they just have no idea what a drain ditch looks like. Or, 60 years of spoil piled up on the edge of it worries them bad.
Well, you know, where do you haul the spoil to? Question, right? There's no place, you can't put it in the, you know. Anyway, I'm concerned about that. If you guys would keep me informed, I'd really like to know, because this one, we heard under the radar, these things were being talked about in the Capitol building. And, you know, it's kind of, well, we haven't decided when or what or anything. So it was just this nebulous talk. And, you know, even talking to lobbyists and people who are out there chasing down under the radar stuff, there wasn't a lot of talk in the building. So I'll be interested to see what CDPHE has on their mind.
Dr. Chavez.
I am on the Water Quality Control Commission, so please, if you have any concerns, please let me know. There was a significant amount of concern about the level of stakeholder outreach that was done. Specifically, you know, to many rural areas or people carrying, you know, worried about this kind of issue. And I did take that forward to the commission, saying we need to do a better job with our outreach. I think I echo your concerns about staff expertise, and that is something that they recognize themselves, that they don't have that expertise right now to carry out a program like that. And they would need help and support from the state legislature and funding for new positions to support a permitting program. Because right now we can't even keep up with some of our other permits that we're trying to get out of there. So, you know, please feel free to reach out to me and talk to me. I will take your message back to the commission and to the division. I hear your concerns.
Yeah, Director Gray.
Just related to that, it concerns me. I mean, the new Sackett decision is right where it needs to be. And I anecdotally personally got caught in a different state. I was building a little subdivision and a road across a gully that flows when the irrigation system's on. It flows very little, but it has some wet plants in the bottom of it, this little draw. And I was faced with like, you can't do that. As soon as this came out, and this is in Idaho where they don't quite go as far as Colorado. The representative from Army Corps said, it looks like that's changing. Even before the rulemaking came out, he said, go ahead and build it. And it absolutely was no direct nexus to a river. It flew for a little ways and then went underground and, you know, makes it to the river subterraneously. But that direct nexus definition change to what it is now is exactly what we want, folks. We're not trying to degrade the environment. And every time I hear a news release, it's, oh, the Supreme Court took away all of our protections. You know, there might be some cases, I suppose, I don't know, but everything I've seen is that it doesn't need jurisdiction if it's not directly connected. So I don't know if we need to take a position or if we want to, but probably won't do any good given our makeup of things right now.
Yeah, I guess I would say, Director Ray, I certainly understand your perspective and to agree with it, but I would also say the definition of state waters is everything, and it incorporates the situation you just said. If it had been in our state always would have thought of those as state waters. The only difference being is that the state has relied for the purposes of 404 permits on the Army Corps for issuing those. And when this gap that Rebecca has been discussing, the Sackett gap arose, and frankly, we dealt with this, you know, through some CDPHE processes a year or two ago at this point when this was coming. And we've done a lot of work with CDPHE staff to get them to understand the ag exemption under the Clean Water Act and make sure that that was incorporated in the proper way into anything CDPHE does as they move forward. And that we did at the direction of the board. I think what you're talking about is what we would want to advocate for is a change in the state law and the definition of state waters to therefore limit the jurisdiction of the state to mirror that of the federal government under the
Yeah, that's what I
Sackett
prefer,
decision. And you as a board can give us the direction if you want. No offense to anybody who's elected and sits on the General Assembly today in this board, but that the chances of that diminishment of the definition of state waters occurring under the current body is zero. And so
I agree.
I hate to ask Zane to try to accomplish something that's not gonna be accomplished.
Fair enough. That's kind of what I figured, but I just thought I'd have to say my piece.
Got Director Winery?
Oh, yeah, good morning. You know, my concern is, I don't know how many of you have ever applied for a 404 permit directly or CDHP. You can't get a CDHP person on the phone. So as an end user, you can make all the rules you want. How do they actually, it becomes then a matter of the definition, as Director Catlin said. I'm going to look at it and say that it's that way. They're not even going to come look at it and make a determination. And that's a huge concern, is the end user. So when you apply the rule, you can't even get them to come. And how are they going to administer that? Are they actually going to physically come look at it? And then what's the recourse when there's a disagreement? That's all.
Thanks. We got Director Hawes and then Director Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I recognize there are a lot of concerns about how this gets applied and implemented. I think my understanding is agriculture is often exempted. And so yes, how does that actually show up? How does that work? But I think there's another piece of this that maybe we don't think about is urban areas and how runoff is happening, and we're getting more and more extreme events. So how do we protect those wetlands that we do have for their ability to absorb floodwater? So there's another side of this, and I just think we have to kind of the goal is to find that balance between the two. And I think as we see more and more extreme weather events, wetlands are gonna be part of the toolbox to keep from having these kind of flood events. So just recognize it is a balance. There's things they're trying to figure out for statewide protection, and it is not an easy course. And I appreciate the district being involved and keeping an eye on this.
Dr. Dennison.
I think Director Winery brought up a really good point. When it comes down to how this is applied, this causes some confusion on the ground. And the more that end user, that person who's possibly placing fill in a jurisdictional wetland or below the normal high water line, understands what they need to do or should be doing, the better off we are. Having just secured a 404 permit in a state that has a parallel process, so I had 2 permits to fill out. It's very difficult to do. And what I understood is it leads people to do things that without a permit and in places that they should be getting a permit. And as someone who's secured a lot of 404 permits in the Gunnison Basin, that case by case jurisdictional determination adds a layer of complexity. And the Sackett waters determination, while it may have shrunk the waters that are, we can consider to be, connected to the waters of the state, there still needs to be a determination process. And what I suffered from was having each individual Army Corps person come out and help determine what is and what is not jurisdictional. And that was, a wide range. And I will say, most of the projects are ag exempt, even ones that are on the border, they said that's exempt. But there have been cases where irrigation ditches created a wetland and a developer wanted to build on those, and that was not an exempt process because it had nothing to do with fur and fiber. So simplifying the process as best we can is terrific for the end users.
Thank you. And I want to bring up a related issue to the Sackett decision that is impacting counties. And that is a 1041 permitting process that we use, that we have relied on Waters of the US to define what should be protected, like the fens up on Battle Mountain, just as an example from Trans Mountain Diversion. And so those are not connected. They're no longer protected. So counties can't rely on some of the things they might have for 1041 permitting for diverters. QQ is working on this as well, thinking that counties maybe as a county entity can come up with some thoughts about how to enforce 1041 regulations if we can't rely on Sackett. So kind of connected what's going on at the state and the need for clarifications, sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been through 404 more times than I care to admit, and not for agricultural exemption. They've all been for municipal or other public water supply processes. Colorado's present plan, they don't have one. The development that they're gonna have to do is substantial. I mean, this is gonna take them a couple of years to really undertake before they really get a program, and they do rely completely on Army Corps to take that, or contractors. If you need a clean water permit, it's 401 permit in Colorado, you gotta hire a contractor because they don't have the staffing to do it. I will say I've been very fortunate to have a phenomenal relationship with the Department of Public Health and Environment. And they pick up the phone, they return my calls, they return my emails, so I'm maybe an anomaly, but I've been working with CDA, that organization now for 15 years, so I feel great about that. It seems, the invitation alone that I kind of heard here a little bit ago, but I know it seems like the Water Conservancy districts seem to be excluded from almost nearly all invitations. I have yet to see one. I don't know of any Water Conservancy district here, outside maybe a handful in the Front Range that do get included to be part of task force, even though we have very broad statutory powers as well enacted by the state. And the River District is not necessarily a Water Conservancy district. You're a conservation district. There is a difference. My powers are different. What I kind of am seeing here is a slam and ram. The rules that Army Corps are enacting right now just went into effect, really, literally January. The new rules came out in November, so they're fresh, hot off the press. And I can honestly say Army Corps doesn't necessarily understand how to fully implement these rules. They don't know. And you're seeing applied differently to where Tom was talking about. I'm seeing applied differently across the state with other applicants. There's lack of consistency. For what Colorado is proposing to do, there may already be regulation already that Army Corps through the 401 process is going to continue to implement until this gets chased back up through the federal court system. And that's their MO. That's what our present federal administration has indicated, has stated, and that seems to be the direction that I'm getting, that they're kind of going. They just moved the definitions around for a few words, but you got the same applicability of WOTUS as it was prior to the Supreme Court decision. So what I'm getting at is it seems like there's the opportunity for duplicative regulation to be happening here. And I think it's important that we affirm that the Sackett versus EPA ruling is applied as ruled by the Supreme Court and the rules as developed by the Department of Interior EPA along with the state. I don't think the state fully understands what these rules are and how they're being implemented. That is going to create a larger problem. And they almost kind of let the dust settle and see how Army Corps settles this thing out, which is going to take them at least a year to get continuity across their departments, because that continuity is flat out not there. And I've had several conversations with applicants who are asking for jurisdictional determination, and there is a gross lack of inconsistency. And it goes to the ordinary high water mark. It goes to significant nexus. It goes into relatively permanent waters. Those are clearly defined, but they're not being applied with consistency as ruled, as developed by the rules, the definition. The definitions were tied to one word. Now it's been, well, we're gonna move it over here. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Holden. If anybody else has anything pressing, jump in. Otherwise, in the interest of time, we should.
Well, I just make one quick comment. I mean, I'm sure we need to keep an eye on this because, I mean, if this is the governor's priority, it's gonna come down the pike. And you can bet that we're gonna see some requests for but hopefully we'll have manpower at least. So we're gonna see.
Worry about that. Every bill that comes has at least 2 FTEs.
Well, this one could take 2 for every county. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, just a clarification, I think on the memo to make sure that the directors understand that the money that the legislature dedicated to the Water Quality Control Division is to do the stakeholder outreach and start the development of this program. It's not per se to start the program itself. So it's I think it's like $200,000 or something. It's just to get them started.
Right, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you. You'll keep me posted.
Yes.
Just unleash the can. Beehive.
All right, let's do directors' updates and concerns, and we'll have a break after that. And let's start online. Director Winery, what's going on in Hinsdale County?
You know, well, it's finally snowing some. We've had huge winds. The weather's kind of like credit card debt. Everybody enjoys it until you got to pay for it later. Seems kind of like, you know, one of the huge concerns is the amount of beetle kill trees that we have now. The new beetle is affecting it's actually the spruce budworm, which is affecting the Douglas fir trees, which will have an overall effect, either fire and or runoffs. It fascinates me that you can use, because it's a worm, and it hasn't been cold enough to really, you know, old-fashioned winters to kill off the worm. But you can't use a herbicide with an aircraft, but you can spray the same herbicide in a field full of tomatoes or in a cornfield, but you can't use it to get rid of this on private lands. It will be a huge concern again on fire and the way the runoffs, because we've already lost 90% of our Engelmann spruce, and now the mid transition range with the Douglas fir and stuff, you know, and some, you know, in this forest, it will be a major problem later on. There's nothing you're going to do about it because it's already dead. And people are, you know, as soon as the trees turn brown, then people want to do something about it. But the problem is they should have done something early on, and you can't. And so that's that. And, you know, and the other issues are, you know, no different than everybody else's, economies and politics. But other than that, it's fairly quiet.
Thank you. Nice hat, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, well, as soon as I saw that the hat that's sitting there on the table that I'm not there to get, I had to go get this one. Yeah, Vandenbrink's gonna take that home. I saw that.
Well, Stan, someday you'll have to actually show up and we'll get you a hat.
Yeah, I'll be there. And then I'm gonna have you autograph it, Andy.
All right, Director, are you up there?
I'm sorry, Kathy?
Hi, thanks. Hi, Ruby. Thanks for jumping in. We're on direct concerns, so let us know what's going on in Saguache County.
Sure. Well, like Stan, we're finally getting some winter weather, and my main concern at this time is that we're going to have icing problems because of the warm and then the cold, of course. I think we've all gotten out of the habit of having a real winter, so any time it gets cold like this, it's hard to believe that we used to survive this. But you know, there's just so many things out there, like you said, political and everything else, that I worry for a lot of the people that are trying to make a living and just having issues with heating and now the winter. But again, this is Colorado, so we've had a lot worse. We just need to get tough, I guess. So also my internet is going in and out. I don't know if it's mine or yours, but I appreciate being able to participate by Zoom. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruby.
Up in Grand County, our snowpack went from 65 to 80%, with this last storm going up to 85 to 100%. So we're kind of back to normal at this point in time, which is extremely nice. Heavy winds with it, which was not fun, but it really put that snow into big drifts, which will help as it comes off this summer. The other thing up in Grand County is the Windy Gap Connectivity Channel, this fall, late October. That was opened up, and used for the first time. There's still a lot of work to be done there on the connectivity channel. And the public will not be allowed to use it until 2027 as that heals up, the new part of that heals up and everything. That will be a huge positive for the Colorado River and everything. And I've got to thank the River District and the Board of Directors for putting money towards that project. That helped tremendously and allowed that particular project to leverage additional monies from that. So thank you very much, River District, on that.
Well, you caught me mid-typing part of my memo here, because I tend to not remember things. But I'll do my best to summarize my sentence that I didn't complete, so, thank you. I've got 4 items here right now, if I could, please. I've been personally, at the request of Dan Birch, about a decade ago, to really speartip our district and the development of a White River management plan and programmatic biological opinion. The working group is the water users, CWCB, Utah, U-Tribe, Recovery Program Director's Office, PDO, and the Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District. Support has been expressed to move forward with the PBO by the River District, water users, Rio Blanco Water Conservancy District, Yampa White Green Basin Roundtable, Rio Blanco County, White River and Douglas Conservation Districts, and Rangeley has verbally expressed that to me as well. Right now, the state is actually saying they don't want to finalize the management plan or the PBO. They maybe want to do some riprap stuff like that to do something that doesn't make it permanent. But since we've been working at this now for 10 years, we did actually receive a grant to develop a White River management plan to progress into a PBO. There's been thousands of hours put together to develop a plan along with a scope of work. Grant opportunity that came to the state to fund, or I shouldn't say grant opportunity, the Colorado Endangered Species Trust Fund to fund a scope of work, hire a contractor to progress towards finalization of a PBO. In December, I believe it was this year, there was a letter that came from the DNR stating that the state, the CWCB nor the DNR supports the finalization of a PBO for the White River, even though it's been identified that there is a downward trend on population numbers, increase in non-native fish species. And there is, based upon the program directors, the flow recommendations, a need for up to 27,770 acre feet annually water to benefit and contribute to the recovery of these species. This is ongoing. We are not done with the discussions. It seems to be this is more of a negotiation than anything else. And we've got some folks that have that are on the planning team that have not taken positions yet. That's fine. There's some folks feeling it out, but it's getting very expensive. And we all unanimously agreed, all those planning members all agreed to do the scope of work, to develop a draft White River management plan, to move it forward. And then all of a sudden, somebody had a change of heart and said, not so fast, guys, we're done. For a group of water users and all those that are in support of it, we find this very frustrating. So the state does not want to memorialize present depletions, develop a suite of future recommendations, and create nor implement permanent protections for the fish species. Rio Blanco County, and I know I'm going to kind of go off the cuff a little bit, because they wanted to introduce wolves. You know, that's not a threatened endangered species. Now they're talking about changing of another game species in Northwest Colorado, but yet they have an endangered species that they don't want to follow. Colorado needs to figure out what the hell they're going to do. What's more important? So, and I'm confused, because here I got a conservative county, anti-endangered species, that now is, they're for the endangered species. You have an opportunity here that really these folks are on board to do it. And now you have organizations that are for endangered species that want to push it, that's saying, I don't think so. I am so confused. So, and I think the River District, Rebecca's been on there. She's been doing some great stuff. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for what you've done. Thank you. Tom Pitts, and there's several others that need to be commended for their actions because they're all scratching their heads too. So, item 2.
You gotta shorten them down.
These are a lot shorter. The water supply return study that's going on with the River District's part funding in the upper White River Basin around Meeker is underway. They've got well loggers, data collection, modeling, flow measurement, and ground on the ground interviews with people in the works right now. It'll be a year or so before the final report is done. Rangeley finalized a decade-long renovations to their water treatment works diversion and continued to the treatment and distribution system. Rangeley has expressed the sincere interest for a firm and emergency water supply. Rangeley is 100% dependent upon the White River. These folks need water. And I've seen it to where they can't divert their water because it's just, you don't want it, what's in there. So they have reaffirmed to me that we have a commitment that we are seeking that. And I'm advocating for them folks because they need that. Finally, the last thing I have is the Division of Water Resource recently informed to the White River users that they are progressing to over appropriate the White River. This is not news, as the division engineer has previously shared this in public information venues. The concern that we have is there is no augmentation source available for people within the White River Basin. That's a problem. The Moffat County just went through that, but fortunately they have some means of doing that to offer some augmentation. White River does not have that capability right now. So those are things that I myself am striving to develop, but work with our other water users to develop a plan so they keep moving forward. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hey, Director McGinnis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just like everyone else, I hope, is enjoying the snowfall. So that storm kind of settled out over the Grand Mesa, and for odd reason, about every hour dropped an inch. So in 24 hours, we got 24 inches. The day preceding that day, we had 10 inches. So the Grand Mesa is loading up heavy load of snow. So that's good news. And interestingly, I'm hearing a lot more about the reintroduction of the wolves by a factor of 10 than I am acquisition of the Shoshone water rights. And it's not because our media people haven't done. The River District's done an excellent job, and where it really counts right now are the elected officials. Interestingly, I've had 0 reach out from the elected officials, from the city of Grand Junction, city council, but our county commissioners down there are very, very enthusiastic about it. So very positive report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, so similarly, the Upper Gunnison has started to work with USGS on the development of a scope of work for an irrigation return flow study as well. Better understanding that groundwater surface water interaction within the basin. As you know, our basin is predominantly flood irrigated. So we should know more, I would say, by March, and are happy to share the scope of that study with the Colorado River District. And may in fact be coming to the CFP for funding support to carry that out. Andy, as you know, when you came to speak to our ranchers, they were not interested in fallowing. But obviously in drought years, they deficit irrigate and things like that. So really understanding that when it's happening and what's happening to the river system and the groundwater is really important. The district has started a drought contingency planning process, and right now we're working with the task force on the development of the scope of work and getting the USBR's approval of that process, and then we'll go out to the broader stakeholder community. My biggest concerns right now are just acquiring the funding for these ASO flights. They are critically important to our basin, being a headwater community. Last year, for instance, we had a warm up period and we had rivers right at the top, ready to flood and go over the banks. It got cold, that slowed down. People thought the peak was over with, but that second ASO flight confirmed for us that there was going to be a significant second peak, and there was still 60% that snowpack and sweet up on the mountains. And so that was really important for Gunnison County in terms of our flood management and the district. Icing problems, similar things. We've had CDOT out breaking ice under bridges and stuff, just to kind of get that stuff moving through. I think, on the good side, I think where CWCB is interested in putting an eddy covariance flux tower in the Upper Gunnison Bays, and then we had a couple of larger ranchers who were interested in having that on their land and in their site. Other big thing I think is the fact that I think our federal agencies are struggling with personnel. I think housing is a big issue for them and keeping people in those jobs. A lot of those jobs are being pulled from, resort communities in the mountains. People are going to the Front Range because those jobs pay more. Or, they have an easier time finding housing on the Front Range than they do in resort areas or in the mountains, and it's kind of expensive. So I think the CWCB really wants us to spend some of this wildfire ready funding that they have, but we can't. We're sort of at a standstill in getting clearances from our federal partners at the BLM or the Forest Service to do wildfire mitigation, especially in source water protection areas, where we might want to get that done. So that's a little frustrating, and we're continuing to having discussions on whether we could develop a partner agreement that would allow us to basically subsidize a position to get some of those clearances done within our basin. So that's what's going on right now.
You're busy.
Not too much new in Moffett County. Probably the only, just broadly speaking, the date of the power plant closure got moved up by 2 years to be completely done in 28 instead of 30, which was the
Which
original.
power plant?
Craig Power Plant. And there's 3 units there. They'll start shutting the first one down in 25. So that's not very far away. I think it's kind of hitting the, we had the announcement and then kind of panicked a few years ago and then got up in the morning, went back to work, and life was kind of like normal. But it's starting to hit the reality of it's happening. So water wise, we had a great year, as we've talked about before last year, and we're waiting to see what we get this year, but not much new otherwise.
Ray County Director.
Not a lot of news to report for Uray County. The American Rivers Project, the Uncompahgre Multi-Benefit Project, is starting to get some traction moving forward. We appreciate the funding from the Community Funding Partnership. And that should be an exciting project. And it does include some irrigation system improvements to a head gate that's in pretty bad shape. And we hope that kicks off some more good projects in Uray County. It's been a bit of a dismal start to the water year. Hopefully it turns around. I know I haven't talked to our county commissioners too much about what they'd like to report back to the River District, but I'll continue discussing their issues with them in the future and report back. So.
Thank you. Director Roper.
Delta County, not a lot to report. Welcome the snow. It was looking a little dire for a while, but I think hopefully this turns around. I think there's a lot of interest yet in efficiencies, and so I think I know Delta County's been on the high end of receiving funds, but I think you will continue to get requests. So just fair warning. There was 3 or 4 head gates on the North Fork River that flooded out last spring. They're going to be looking to try and improve efficiencies and redoing those. So be forewarned that community funding might be getting asked, and they're always looking for money like everybody else. So that's all I have.
The benefit of the Shoshone commitment by this board is that Delta is no longer a disproportionate leader in the recipient category. So it opened up a whole new world for you.
Good to know.
Director Minder.
So personally, I don't know, everybody's really bragging on the snow. I enjoyed it that we hadn't had that much snow. Sure makes feeding the cows a lot easier. And so, and again, I guess for our valley, really, for other than the skiing, I mean, we'd much rather have 2 inches of rain in May than I would, and gas scours and everything else. I'd rather have that than having the winter that we had last year, and then have and then the dust event come in and wiped out all the snow and took out of our water anyhow. So the wind was horrendous during the last storms and the rest. We normally don't get wind. We seem to be dropped down on the vortex So the Upper Yampa, we've been busy doing a couple things too. So we are actually gonna undertaking $1 million some type of forest readiness project, and the rest, I don't know how the hell we're gonna do it. And I'm really concerned about what we're gonna do with anything. And it's gonna be great to do some planning on it, but how do you plan it when your closest sawmills in Montrose and the rest? I mean, I'm really very concerned about that. We talk about wanting to figure out how we can fix our forests. And when our forests are, and then with the cost of fuel, when our forests are, 400 miles away, 300 miles away to get to the products to some usable scope. I mean, we can scatter all the wood chips we want to on the forest, but I don't know how that helps things too much. So, but anyhow, we're gonna be working on a project and figure out what we're gonna do. I think our budget, especially, we're gonna be ramping up our grant program, I think, trying to figure out what we're gonna do with these additional property taxes that we're gonna be getting as well. We have a fixed mill levy, as does the River District, and so we're gonna be figuring out how we can up our grant program as well for our constituents and get some more thing. We don't need to grow the entity so much. We need to, I'm looking at hoping that we can grow our services. And again, I don't know, we've been talking about this. We talked about it, that was talked about at the drought task force too. I mean, our storage is snow. And somehow we need to get by that. We need to start, and again, I keep advocating for some small storage things, and they need to be solely storage for dumping water in the summer and the rest, and then filling up again the next winter. And you don't need to have 500, 500,000 acres of water, acre feet of water. We need to have 3,000 and 5,000 acre feet waters. And those would be some little ponds to somebody, but we need those things to start doing, and then being able to drain them during the summer and fill them up again. I think, our Elk River, for instance, it's one of the worst places. It has an in-stream flow that has never been met since the in-stream flow was put on it. It's never been met, and yet it's shutting down, and CPW has water sitting in Steamboat Lake that could dump into Elk River to fill that in-stream flow, and yet they're into the recreation business there and they're not into the water supply business. So that ends up being a problem. So again, I'm very concerned about continue us fixing the problem that we have with the Forest Service and not taking care of the cutting trees, and that we're backfilling them now. We're going to be taking care of their problem that they wouldn't take care of for the last 100 years. And so, and that now Forest Service ends up having their priorities as homes, and our priority is water, and trying to figure out how we can balance some of that out. So anyhow, thank you.
Thank you. Wonder.
I'll try to keep it quick. So we have another new commissioner. So we've had 2 new commissioners in 6 months. So lots of turnover in Summit County, which is making it interesting, but both new commissioners really care about water. So I think that's a good thing. I think my biggest concern, big picture, is the state of negotiations in the Colorado River right now. What happens if they don't get to agreement? How do we make sure we're prepared, kind of to some of the points you just made, and have solutions that work for Colorado? So that's definitely something top of mind, and we've got just a few months to see how this is gonna start to play out. I will not be at the April meeting, but there is gonna be an application coming before you for the community funding partnership around on the Lower Blue that I think is a really important project. That Lower Blue beneath the dam is pretty hammered and definitely needs some support, and it is a really important part of that recreation economy. So that'll be coming before you. And finally, I'm concerned about my drive home, so I'll stop.
Yes, it's pretty dicey. And I'll be quick as well. The couple of things in Eagle County. First is that everyone is so excited about Shoshone. I think, driving by it all the time, it's top of mind. And so I get stopped in the streets a lot, excitement about Shoshone. And people, their next question is, how can I contribute? So people want to be part of buying those water rights, so I think that's exciting. Second thing, we are trying to get ahead of the governor's housing plans and last year's debacle over that 213 bill, trying to pressure counties and towns to do things with housing that just didn't work in the resort areas. So we've got some cooperative assessments going on between all the towns and the county and the Eagle River Valley side. Roaring Fork is doing some similar work, and there's a big awareness, which is great, about water availability and how much water do you actually have. And if you need housing and you need affordable housing, you better be figuring out how to save those supplies for affordable housing. And the last one is also a connection with that affordability piece. Our water suppliers are really concerned about the regulatory costs of the discharge permits for the sewage plants. Town of Gypsum is looking at multi-millions of dollars to come up to standards that they don't feel is necessary. Eagle River Water and Sand has some of the similar concerns, but that cost of water is going to raise the cost of housing as well. That's it. So it is almost 10 o'clock. We are about.
They get better.
I thought you were. Sorry.
Well, they gave me an upgrade. Well, in the Uncompahgre Valley in Montrose County, I'm about ready to get the plow out and start. It's just been dry. I mean, I think we're all gonna breathe a little relief. Our neighbors and guns can happen, so that'll help us. Just the youth really getting some real. I think everybody's just kind of holding their breath in regards to what's next. How do we go about these things? I have had a number of conversations about Shoshone. That far away. People are aware of it. They think it's a good idea. They like the idea that there's water in the Colorado River. And some of those in the know realize that 15-mile reach is a big deal if you're farming in diverted water. So I think I think our timing was good on that. That was a well-managed event. Because many people were there. You could tell that staff had done a great job of bringing people into that, and the venue was great. You know, historical places for historical events. I thought that was really cool. My commissioners, you know, they don't usually worry about what we're doing up here, but they were interested in Shoshone. So, you know, I think we're right on the path of the River District doing some really amazing things. You know, I tell people that our staff total is less than most of these people's legal department that we end up fighting with. So you guys are all punching above your weight, and I think that's commendable. In Montrose, I think what's happening is you can see this little transition. A lot of folks are moving in there from Denver and from leaving the big cities and just love that little town to death. But this is what we did at home. And, you know, I just asked them if it's still home, you don't come back. You know, take it. There's not enough natives and there's not enough, you know, folks that, yeah, but the reason you're still welcome here is because we welcome you. And now you're here, oh, lock the gate, hell, you can't let this get ruined. So there's some pressures on that. You know, nothing, there's no revolution or anything like that, but I think we're gonna see some changes in the way Montrose runs. Ag, still there, still doing its job out at the edge of town, and you know, the water users, I see them working with the River District in regards to thinking out how are we gonna do some of these new things, and we'll watch and see. But Montrose is in good shape. One of those communities that just seems to be resilient and keeps on trucking, so that's all I've got.
Thank you. All right, let's take until 10:10 for a break. We're about 45 minutes behind, so we will try to get close. There we go. All right, welcome back from break. We are on the community funding partnership administrative changes, and that is on page 420 of your.
And I just want to say, I've talked to staff and everything that they're talking about is important, but we're gonna assume that you've all read the memo. Each one of these following presentations, and that's what get you on the road. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask, just we're trying to be conscientious of your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are going to start the community funding partnership with our proposed administrative changes to the program. It's become standard practice for us to bring a slate of those proposed changes to the board in January. This is still a new program within the district. We learn different items throughout the year. We build lessons learned working with grantees. The other item I wanted to flag for the board is we are doing a no action during this board meeting because we are going to align the CFP framework with the board's multi-benefit policy statement that is also up for renewal. So we've brought these items for discussion during this meeting with proposed action in April. And then the third preface is that in all of our changes, we do try to ensure that our guidelines and the framework provide clarity to our grantees, but we want to remain flexible in recognition that each of our basins and watersheds are very different. And we want these guidelines to be adaptable to many circumstances. So the items that we have brought forward are a clarification on recognizing the importance of prioritizing multi-benefit and multi-purpose water projects. We already have strong language in the CFP framework in the board's multi-benefit policy that recognizes that prioritization and importance. And working with our grantees, we are recommending that we include language of the practical intent of that, of we do always try to use the community funding partnership dollars to projects that have multiple benefits, have a wide impact across multiple beneficiaries across a region or watershed. So we have recommended language that would be consistent throughout the board's multi-benefit water project policy, the CFP framework, and the CFP guidelines to have cohesion throughout. We do think that this maintains our current approach as staff, and it also is still supportive of aging infrastructure projects. We know that's important to this board, has been a good discussion across the state lately, and we have a good track record of continuing to fund those projects. The other changes that we've included are more guidelines on farm projects. We continue to have strong interest from our constituents on support for on-farm upgrades. So we have included more clarification as to how those fit in the community funding partnership. We've included language on having an articulation of the public benefits, wide-ranging public benefits that those projects would provide, and also a recommendation that we would support projects that may be bundled together, working in partnership with a conservancy district or a conservation district or other entity, and projects that demonstrate a regional approach that aligns with a stream management plan or an integrated water management plan or any other system optimization effort. So we have included that language in your board packet. And then the final two clarifications are some additional clarity on funds provided by the applicant. We wanted to increase the clarity of that language, that there are meaningful cash equivalents that our applicants bring to the table in terms of services or labor or equipment directly related to a project. And we believe that's a meaningful contribution that still articulates the local support for the project. And then we've also included more information on typical cost share percentages for the CFP, maintaining a strong support for our emphasis that CFP should be leveraging other state, federal, local funds. So I will pause there and open it up for board discussion. And again, we'll pick this back up in April after we get any feedback from the board today.
Comments, questions, Director Gray and then Director McGinnis.
I guess as I read this memo, it seems like we need to be really careful on the on-farm projects. Because not every place is the same. There's sometimes there's water quality issues, sometimes there's turn flow issues. We've in the past stayed away from some of those efficiency improvements for that reason. While I think there are places where it's appropriate, us being purveyors and deciding where that is, the slippery slope you now stand on by starting to go that route. I'm just concerned. Is there not I know that of course, any meeting you have with your neighbors gonna say, where can I get some more money to do some farm improvements? I don't think that's a good enough reason to, as a policy board, to go that direction, just because there's interest. I'll stop there, and if I'm the outlier here, then I'll listen. If I'm not, then this kind of, okay.
Dr. McGinnis.
I completely agree with what Tom said. I mean, that really stuck out to me. I think that's, just like you said, a slippery slope, and it's the same thing we kind of recognize with municipalities and many other cities that have other income sources. And we're kind of the new bank in town. We get the bad loans. And so what Tom's saying about this farm stuff, I don't think the taxpayers that we talked to anticipated that we would, venture into private landowners, things like that necessarily. So I hope we tread carefully.
Dr. Thomas.
Dr. McGinnis, I respectfully disagree. I think the message that our constituents heard when the 7A ballot issue came out was that we would support productive agriculture. And I think today there are some really significant problems within the Department of NRCS. I have projects that I am rescuing in my basin because they are 3-4 years out. People are having projects that are over designed or not designed properly, or they are in jeopardy of losing their EQIP funding because NRCS doesn't have the staff to do the planning or the engineering. I think we also need to recognize that the cost of on-farm improvements, head gates, anything like that has tripled. So that cost share component is becoming very important to our water users. I think the recognition that every basin is different is really important. The Upper Gunnison doesn't have ditch associations or ditch companies. There are maybe 2 or 3 water right holders on a ditch oftentimes. And we don't have a lot of small ranches. We have big ranch owners with big expensive projects that they're trying to get done sometimes. And sometimes we have one water user who might want to do a project. The beneficiary of that project is 500 acres of land. So my encouragement would be that we continue to support on-farm projects. I think we heard in the drought task force that is the primary interest of many of our water users, whether they be municipal or agricultural. I think a little bit of engineering support could be very helpful to expedite projects through NRCS. If we can get that engineering done for them in advance or give them a little money to help do that. So I am very much a proponent of helping and clarifying, and I really appreciate Amy's time in discussing some of the concerns of the Upper Gunnison and some of the needs and the uniqueness of different areas of our district and the Western Slope. So.
Dr. Jim.
Very much appreciate the comments from Director Gray and Dr. McGinnis and Dr. Chavez. I think there is a concern about funding on-farm projects and what's being provided. And I think hinging these on what is a multi-benefit project is super important. Some of the very best environmental projects I've ever been associated with were upgrading, simply improving splitter boxes on a ranch that had really wasteful system, put a lot of water in Dallas Creek, helped ranchers, helped the fishery, wasn't looked at as a multi-benefit project. To help with the irrigation, it helped with their time management, with their resources, and it spread water out a lot better. It wasn't looked at as a multi-benefit project. And it was a big ranch. They didn't think about talking to downstream users. They didn't think about talking to Trout Unlimited or any other organization about it, but it really is a multi-benefit project. That being said, there is some caution that needs to be applied. we can be increasing consumptive use, which is fine. It can happen when you upgrade efficiencies. But really digging into how are we using water better and actually conserving water through these on-farm practices and improvements needs to be evaluated. So looking first at how do we create a multi-benefit project out of on-farm improvements, I think needs to be the first step.
Director Munger and Director Gray.
So I got, yeah, a couple of things. I'm very concerned about the on-farm thing as well. And again, we called it always down ditch off and making sure, and I think we're all hitting on it. You know, what is the community benefit? Why is everybody else putting into the guy that has 1,000 acres out there? That we need to fund his irrigation improvements. When I first got on this board, we started talking about, well, we're gonna increase irrigation efficiency by a sprinkler system in my county. That ended up being a funding expanding situation. So we were gonna expand it by another 100 acres. It was gonna be by the saved water. He was from flood irrigating. He was gonna put it on to expand it on a sprinkler system and expanding his irrigation system. So I'm not saying hell no, but I think we ought to be, and we open those floodgates and and we haven't really come up with, as Director Dennison's been saying, we haven't really come up with, and I think that staff is trying to hit on that. What is the community benefits of that? Is it, less waste of water? And at the same point in time, in my section of the river and the rest, when we're up above the shale and the rest, we're providing wildlife habitat, and those are good waters that we're kind of wasting out there and that they run off and run back down to the river again. So I am really concerned about how we do that, and I appreciate the clarity and trying to get to some more clarity and try to monetize that or something and trying to figure out on that. One thing I saw when we were looking through, and the NRCS, yeah, it's, I don't know why we even, we had a guy, but our guy in the steamboat that serves Moffett County, Jackson County and Routt County, the position was not filled for 8 years. It was open and didn't have one. And so now we finally got somebody, and now he got transferred out. He's still in our office, but he's servicing somebody else. So he's taking care of something other. So that's really a thing. The cash equivalents, I think that's a great idea. Somewhere there has to be a set schedule of what a backhoe's worth with operator. I think that would be, I filled out a couple of these applications. I know what they look like and how you try to value, well, my time, how do I value my time and trying to put it into a grants application? So if there's a table out there somewhere that shows what a bulldozer is, that I contribute, that I have a bulldozer and I have a backhoe and I have a truck that can haul. If there's a table out there somewhere, it would sure help the standards. Well, this is what you're allowed. I don't know if that makes sense or right, but it would sure make the difference in people coming in. Well, my backhoes were $75 an hour and this other guy's got $150 backhoe with operator. So if you guys had allowable rates, or not even allowable rates, but suggested rates, might be nice, and you wouldn't have, and I know you guys do a heck of a good job of mining through these grant applications and trying to find the holes in them and the rest and questions so that we don't have those same questions. But anyhow, I think that would really help us a little bit. Thank you.
We got Director Gray and Director Catlin and Andy.
Oh, I just wanted to say, so yeah, we opened up a discussion here, and Director Chavez, I think we need to define what on-farm projects are. Certainly, as Director Dennison said, some not changing of irrigation application practices, but just making them more efficient, better splitter boxes, better head gates that allow fish passage and all those things that we've been supporting are great. I don't think we have a problem with that. I think where it gets in the weeds is, are you gonna buy me a sprinkler? And even then, if we go down that road, yeah, there are probably places where it's high salty soil and you can make the case that it's better water quality and it's multi-benefit. But how far down that road do we want to go? Well, with the the jurisdictional judge on that, and all of a sudden my neighbor's getting one and I don't. So we just need to really be careful and probably define what efficiency means and define what on-farm projects we can at least look at. That's my thought.
I do agree with you, Director Ray, on the efficiency and the sprinkler side versus a piece of pipe to stop some seepage in order to get more water to the end of a field or
Yeah.
a head gate, that's not, I'm with you there, just to
So
clarify.
maybe we're on the same page, we just need better definitions.
Thank you. I have a question in regards to, are you seeing an increase in on-farm applications?
I will say, I think we see continued interest in constituents reaching out to us about our program for on-farm projects. I think in large part, like Director Chavez mentioned, some of the backlogs and NRCS equip programs that are well positioned to support some of those and some of the increased cost. But I'll let Melissa add anything to that in terms of communication with potential grantees.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of inquiries that they just say, hey, NRCS is taking too long. What are my options here? And some are sprinkler systems, some are improving a head gate, some are piping their ditch. It's really a full spread of
Well,
options.
the reason I ask that question is that it seems like these community-wide and some of those things are such large dollars that on-farm is probably not the same price as working on Gunnison's treatment facility. Maybe one of the things we could talk about is to say the delivery systems. It looks to me like, and I've said this 1,000 times, the low-hanging fruit in Colorado is updating the delivery systems. You get that water back way cheaper than you do any other way. That's what I'm hoping the Drought Task Force and some of them continue to pound on that. Some of these kind of things we might be able to take a look at, in regards to piping from the head gate to the place. Because, a lot of times we run through other neighbors' ground and we waste a lot of our water from the head gate to the place. Some of those kind of things. I don't think that I want to be the guy that starts to tighten the nuts and say, well, this is where we can do this, but we can't do that. I think it really matters. And it's saddling you with the decision. Is this one we could look at, or is this one we should step aside from? We want ag to be thinking about how they can conserve water. And, not necessarily expand where they're running it. I don't think we ought to get into that. But, it is a little tricky when we start talking about private property and public money and those things. Do you see many opportunities from landowners coming to us for bridge funding or, between what they have, what the Fed has, to help get them the big grant? Are there many of those kind of applications? If I was gonna ask, that's what I'd ask.
Director Callan, I think those are great points, and I think some of the struggle with on-farm is there's not a lot of places for people to go for financing or even some sort of bridge loan opportunity. And so they are looking at our program as a potential option to help fill those gaps, especially with the backlog in federal funding and how the federal funding may at one time been a significant percentage of some of these upgrades, and now with increased costs, it's less so. And so we are in this, I really appreciate the feedback from the board because it is really helpful for us to wade through what is the role of CFP in some of these opportunities. Do you have anything to add, Melissa?
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, if I can, I want to weigh in. I appreciate the director's discussion on this, and I think it's important. I really stress with our staff to try to avoid making this program filled with black lines and rules. And Director Gray, you suggested maybe we ought to define some words and prohibit certain practices. And I'm very concerned that if we keep doing that every year, we will end up being as slow and inefficient as the federal government. And
That's possible.
okay, yeah, but I really, the beauty of CFP is that it is nimble and that it can be thoughtful and we can look at individual projects, large or small, within the context of our district's priorities and our policies, and the staff is I think intelligent enough to be able to sort through those and understand them and ask the right questions on return flows and others. We've sent a whole lot of on-farm sprinkler requests packing, okay, without any improvement to the rules, because we understand the board's perspective on that and the district's perspective on that. If we start having black lines that we have to reject every one of those, there are some that are really actually beneficial to the district's priorities. And so trying to define those, it's going to get us into a situation that we're going to have a code of district regulations similar to the code of federal regulations. And an applicant's going to need a lawyer to apply to our district. And I don't want to get to that place. I would say this though, that striking that balance where we constantly, and if you really look at the way that this was laid out in the memo, we want projects that demonstrate multiple benefits across the CFP categories and impact multiple beneficiaries. That's what we're stressing, right? But as it gets smaller and as the number of beneficiaries shrink, the amount of complexity, the amount of multi-benefits, the amount of public good needs to grow before our staff will agree that it should be funded, right? And that's really the balance, right? That's if it's a community-wide benefit of the Uncompahgre system, and we can help get them moving on some improvements that will allow them to conserve water, great. If it's one farm or ranch and it's one beneficiary, we want to know what the public benefit is and why we should spend public dollars on it. And that's what this language is really aimed at, is trying to pull that out. And it can be situations like the ones Director Dennison identified, that there actually is a surprising public benefit. But on the other hand, some of these is all about, enriching one particular person's pocketbook, and we've got to be able to identify that and distinguish that. And it's, I think, Amy and Melissa really worked through this language, and I can tell you, I had some input a couple times. We went through it together to try to figure out where that balance is. And so I would ask the board, and we're going to bring this back to you again in April. I would ask for you to look at this language and give us places where you think we can improve it. Because I would just say Amy and Melissa did what I have asked them to do. We now need to do what you as a board ask us to do. But I really want to make sure that we don't set a black line that we regret in the future. And projects, this came up, and I can just tell you there were some a combination of projects coming out of the Upper Gunnison. And our staff was like, this is really just going to benefit, these individual families, each one of these projects. We don't see a place for us in this. But we wanted to provide some guidelines for folks who could then look at it and understand it and say, oh, all right, well, are there public benefits? And if there aren't, what can I do to make that? How do I make my project work for me and work for the stream system or my downstream neighbors, right? And as far as the return flows, we completely understand on staff that return flows are a huge issue when you put a sprinkler system on a property, especially in the high country. What are you doing to water users downstream? I have talked to our newer staff members about our old grant program where we rejected one of our old directors up in the White River on a sprinkler system installation because we didn't have the science or understanding as to whether or not it would hurt downstream users. We're funding return flow studies in the White River, and we're hoping to fund them in other places to get better science so that we're not operating on a feeling, we're operating on data when we're making those determinations. And that's really where we want to be in the future. And we plan on being there. we don't want to create injury to water users. We don't want to change the hydrologic cycle. We do want to encourage ag users to conserve water while still remaining productive and profitable so that they can stay in business, so that our district is helping them protect their livelihood, right? But we also understand that if ag doesn't adapt, that it will just grow as a target for everybody else in the world to hammer on. So that's where we are. I hope that helps the board understand where we're coming from on this recommendation.
Point taken on the black lines. I guess I haven't had a problem with what we funded so far, the way program's operating. I think you're doing a good job. So when I seen this expansion of on-farm applications, I'm like, well, there must be some direction we're headed, or we wouldn't need to change what we're doing. And so I hear you, and I likewise don't want to see so many black lines that it boggles your mind or glazes your eyes over. So fair enough, point taken. But I do think if we're going to expand, or what's the title? Change additions to the guidelines, then what are we trying to achieve?
Well, we're trying to achieve clarity. We already get applications and have funded some on-farm projects under an analysis that's very similar to what's now laid out here in writing.
Okay.
So we're not opening a new chapter. We have actually received applications that we have approved at the staff level at my discretion that have on-farm. I've also we've rejected a number of them that just don't meet any kind of public comment.
So this is just codifying what you're already doing?
That's right, Director Gray. I think, when we provide feedback, this is the approach that we've taken as staff, but we have at times heard from our constituents of, I didn't see that in your guidelines, or, when I'm calling to ask about on-farm, there isn't very much specificity there. So we think it would help that communication between staff and projects by putting this in our guidelines.
We have Director Hazard online has a comment, and then Director Chavez.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone for their work, and I don't believe that one size fits all. And I would just like to say that we vary so much from the top to the bottom of the basin that everything is considered, not just it's one of those and it doesn't fit in with what we do, but that it is actually reviewed before it's just dismissed.
Thank you, Director Chavez.
Yeah, and I think just that clarification for staff was really important in my conversations with them too. Like, I didn't want to put a lot of effort into developing an application that may ultimately get rejected. It was just kind of getting a better feel for where the board stood on some of these projects, because I often probably will come with a project where there is one beneficiary at the end of the system. So there's one landowner benefiting, but the stream system could be benefiting at the same time. So do I have to have both multiple beneficiaries, or could the stream itself be the beneficiary? And so that, I think this is really helpful. Thank you.
Any other comments on the three items that are presented in this memo? Right, so our task by April is to look at that language, see if it meets the guidelines that we want.
Thank you. We are now going to turn to our programmatic section. So I'll turn it over to Melissa. You all have our 2023 annual report on your desk. It's a great partnership between the CFP staff team and our external affairs staff team. So we will make sure that this is distributed across our district, and we also have this available online. But I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Yeah, no, thank you. The annual report does have in your memo some great graphics of how we closed out 2023. We provided 30 grants throughout the district, and some really exciting news is our accelerator grant program really found some incredible success this past fall. 6 of our grants, most of them were accelerator grants, did receive Water Smart funding through the Bureau of Reclamation, in totaling over $9 million, which means our accelerator grants thus far have leveraged about $9 million. So thank you all for your help, really bringing a lot of these to the table. It's been fun to work with these entities and really honorable to watch their success. As we've mentioned, or Andy's mentioned a couple times, our focus in the next few years will be trying to rebalance our equity targets. This includes focusing on the Gunnison and Yampa White Green basins in Picken County as well. In addition to this, we will be focusing on supporting our infrastructure and conservation and efficiency categorical sections of our equity targets, because those definitely need some love after the Shoshone permanency project of 20 million. So a really great project example to fall within these equity targets is the city of Gunnison's request. Who they are here, actually. Mike Rogers and David Gardner are here, so we can pester them with questions if you have any. But they have come to us with an $150,000 accelerator grant request. As many of you know, the city of Gunnison, that serves a little under 7,000 people, is in a bit of a predicament. They have 9 shallow wells that serve as their main potable water source. And these wells are vulnerable to contamination, wildfire, you name it. And so they're really taking a brave step and trying to take the necessary steps to implement a water treatment plant. To do this, there's a few steps before that, of course, as many of you know, but a main one is to implement an infiltration gallery. And so the request today is $150,000 for design and engineering of the infiltration gallery, which is about a little under 40% of the total cost to construct or to complete the design and engineering for this project. Now, when it comes to the entire funding for this project, we really built this as an accelerator request so that we can support them in securing funds through Congress, through Water Smart, through the state, et cetera. They have also been increasing their rates last year and this year and next year to really start to figure out how can the city support their own system moving forward. And so at the end of the day, the amount of support that has come through our inboxes and phones over the past month has been pretty impressive. They have support from the state all the way down to local supporters. So really, at the end of the day, this is going to build redundancy and resiliency for this town and ensure that they can really sustain a hotter and drier climate with a treatment center that is not as vulnerable to wildfire contamination, that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, we are recommending a full grant of $150,000. 40% will go to infrastructure and 60% will go to watershed health and water quality. I sped through that really quick, but if you have any questions.
Yeah, Director McGinnis.
Yeah, can you go through the in-kind contribution?
The in-kind contribution.
50,000, 550. The city footing, what is that?
So, yeah, and this is a great question, specifically as we just talked about different types of funding. But the city of Gunnison is providing the matching cash of $187,000, and the $50,000 includes additional labor, supplies, et cetera, for the project that is not within the normal scope of expenses that they're going to have to incur.
So do you request an applicant itemization of what that in-kind is? I mean, it kind of goes back to what you're talking about. Hey, my bulldozer's worth this much, or the city may have staff that they're paying anyway. And so, I mean, do we look at that in much detail? Because we've had this discussion in the past. And that seems to get a little bloated, the in-kind part. And I'm very concerned about burden sharing. I don't mind being in on it. I
Right.
wanna make sure that we're sharing. So how do we look at an in-kind contribution similar to this? Is
So-
it itemized number one?
Yeah, in this case, their cash equivalent is higher than ours. And that's our first priority. We're gonna see how much cash are you providing? And an accelerator grant request is usually at a cap of 85% of the total cost. And so this is under 40%. And so they are providing a meaningful cash contribution. So that when it comes to the in-kind contribution, in this case, I did not ask for an itemized detail of this. However, if the coins were flipped and they were saying that their in-kind was the majority of the project cost contribution, then I would be asking, what does that actually entail? And can you provide
It seemed
evidence?
to me that asking anybody, regardless of the ratio, on itemization, and is kind of a level of accountability.
Right.
You went to the bank, they're gonna ask for that kind of, you went to an individual to borrow money, they're gonna ask for that. And I just want us to get in the policy of a blank check. The number you give us, we'll take it. That
Right.
kind of created a housing crisis a few years ago, so
And
go ahead, maybe you can.
yes, thank you for bringing that up. And after some good conversations from the board on considerations of in-kind contributions, we have amended our application to have a more specific section for a budget narrative to include, if you are including in-kinds, please explain to us what that entails so that we can determine that and include it within our staff analysis. So we have strengthened that in our application. And like Melissa said, in this case, the city of Gunnison is bringing a substantial amount of cash that increases the ratio that we typically look for in accelerators. And so that gave us comfort in our staff analysis. But we have addressed some of the application gaps in asking for more specific details on in-kind so we can have those conversations and feel comfortable with the leveraging component of the CFP requests. So I appreciate that.
Well, that's a step in the right direction. I just think, say, and throw in your itemization for us so we can look at the reasonableness of it. Thank you.
So I'll follow up with Director McGinnis's. So if you look at the, let's see, on page 450 of our packet where it has the funding partners, us, Gunnison, it comes up with total of cash coming in of 387, yet the project is only 337. So I think that's kind of where I think Director McGinnis is going. So somewhere we have another entity that's gonna be a cost center that's gotta be the 50,550. So that's how I would see that fitting in. And again, we're all learning we're learning by doing, but it's all good. So thank you.
Director Chavez.
Yeah, typically when you're documenting in-kind contribution as well, you could provide timesheets and things like that, or your staff salaries or rates or whatever to support that documentation. That would be something I typically submit as in-kind to the district, even with the one that we have now. I did want to also emphasize on this project just to broad support for the project. Gunnison County is very supportive of it, so is the Upper Gunnison. The big thing about this project is that the city of Gunnison's well system is under the direct influence of Service Water, or WUDI. And as some of you may know, the Water Quality Control Division looks at those kind of things. And if you do have a system, a WUDI system, they will start enforcement. And I think Uray County is the place where they're having that. Where you can get fines of up to $1,500, $1,400 a day. That is something that we are working to avoid with this project. 2 of those 9 wells have been shut down recently due to contamination. And we already have issues at the shoulder seasons of the year when before you turn on the ditch systems, the wells start to drop and you have issues. And then when you turn them off in the fall, you also see issues, these shortages. And so it's really important that they have both redundancy, ability to blend their systems or their water supplies, and that we don't get into a situation where we're being fined for having a well system and a municipal drinking water system under the influence of Service Water. So just wanted to add that additional context to their grant application.
Comments, question, and we're looking for a motion.
So, Madam Chair, I move that with staff recommendation to fund the.
Second.
Okay, moved by Munger, second by Kaplan. Additional discussion?
Yeah, forgive me, but it sounds like, is there the potential that is this proposal that they're bringing forward going to protect them from having to increase their treatment capacity? Because if they're using surface water or they've got IGW, they will need additional treatment. And is this just the first step into that process to bring you your water security? So I see there's a water plant in here too within there. So, and I understand supply is number one.
Project 1 out of 5.
Okay.
Ones that's gonna be phased through. This is gonna be the first step. It's 1 of the 5 projects. This is on the raw water side. Yep.
Understand that, but your treatment plant is yet to work and you're gonna need a whole hell of a lot more money than what you got here for that.
It's gonna be a $50 million.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we have a motion on the table to approve staff recommendation and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, congratulations, and thanks for making the trek.
Thank you very much.
Okay, last one. So Trout Unlimited has come to us for a request of $150,000 for their Middle Colorado Ag Collaborative Project. I want to first state the obvious. We had just said we are going to prioritize projects in the Gunnison, Yampa, White, Green, Picken County areas. However, we are recommending that the board honor the applications that have been submitted and the pre-application conversations that have taken place prior to the Shoshone Permanency grant provided in December of 2023. And so this application was submitted in November, conversation started in August. And another element is that we provided a grant in early spring of 2023 to support in their engineering and design for this project. So we have been connected for a while. But this is a project Amy and I are personally very excited about because it's a great representation of an entity taking on a large project to therefore take on federal and state funding. And so they have bundled 5 different projects together that are essentially diversion upgrades. They are moving a ditch, they're combining ditches, they're upgrading diversions to support the fish passage within Elk and Canyon Creeks. These are located north of Newcastle, and according to CPW, are pretty imperative habitat for juvenile species of our native fish. So in this project, this altogether, it serves about 3,400 acres of irrigated land and 150 ag users, and is a $6 million project. The really exciting news we have today is that they have already applied for and received their Water Smart grant and are looking for a $150,000 grant to support construction, which really serves as 2% of the total cost. This being said, they have 2 pending requests through CWCB as well as the Fish and Wildlife National Fish Passage Program. And we are recommending that we support this request at $150,000 contingent on them securing the other funds for the entire project. And this would go 30% in productive ag, 30% infrastructure, and 40% healthy rivers. One last note is this project does fall under the Middle Colorado IWMP, which identified 25 diversions, and 5 of them are here in this project. So it's a great way to tackle 5 projects in one. Thoughts?
Any questions?
Yeah, I don't know, silliness here, but the ability to provide more water in the river, I'm confused. I mean, because if you have 5 diversions, I mean, we faced this in the middle Yampa as well, having 5 diversions, all of them diverting, you know, their little bit of water and then spilling some, and then for the next ditch, and then the return flows, the rest. Man, after this water comes out of this ditch, there will be a dry section there for sure. Will it not? I guess can't, I'm not sure if I follow the math here.
Yeah,
5 ditches is still 5 ditches worth of water and it's all coming out at once versus 2 miles of, 5 miles of area, 3,000 acres. So
I think this is, well, first and foremost, most of these ditches are receiving or experiencing about 50% water loss and seepage. And we visited these headgates, they're desperately falling apart. But this project is more about removing impediments to fish passage and just improving the operations and maintenance of these ditches and really ensuring that they are using the best bang for their buck by combining the ditches, et cetera. So actually calculating how much water they're putting back in the river, I don't think we can rely on for this.
I'll shut up. Thank you.
Your comments?
Well, no, it's a good question, though. I can support this because I'm assuming that the ranchers up in the area think it's a good deal. But if you have a 50% ditch loss, does that mean you're gonna divert less up at this one head gate that you now have and then it'll stay in the creek? Is that because it seems like you're losing 50% of it, it's finding its way back to the river, the creek. Yeah, I think what Director Monger said doesn't quite add up in my mind, but I'm okay with it. I wanna understand it.
Yeah, this is a tough conversation we've had and we did have with the applicant, just acknowledging when you improve your system, there's a chance that you will increase your water consumption.
I think this is also the relationship of looking at it as a bundled request of looking at the overall system optimization of, if we took one of these diversions on a one-off basis, we wouldn't see the cascading impact of how combining a few of these ditches and improving the diversions could improve some of the stream habitat for fish spawning in particular, while also improving some of the efficiency and the operations for the landowners and producers that are diverting from this. And so one of the benefits of working also with their application with the Bureau of Reclamation is the assurity that they have the support from the landowners. That's a requirement and something we look at for the CFP, especially in these multi-benefit projects where there is a partnership, public-private partnership between landowners and a nonprofit organization with differing objectives, but they work together on mutually beneficial goals.
Any other questions? We have a motion, we have a recommendation from staff.
Madam Chair, I move staff recommendation.
Motion by Richard, second by Haas. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have one funding approval that was made by our general manager. Thank you very much.
External affairs.
Good morning, directors. We will make this, just for the sake of time, rather brief and then open it up to questions. Lindsay is passing around to directors that were not present for the INO committee meeting this morning, a package of communications materials and a toolkit for our Shoshone Water Right Preservation Campaign. This was also emailed to you just a bit ago. And just wanted to also make a note that in that main messaging package that is on top, thanks to a flag by Director McGinnis, the electronic version has an amended piece to the language about public funding. So just wanted to flag that for you all. I've also emailed several updates since we sent out the External Affairs and Information Outreach Committee memo, including that our annual seminar, which happens in the fall each year, has officially been scheduled for Friday, September 20th of this year. So to mark your calendars, and the budget workshop will take place per usual the day before on Thursday, September 19th. So we will make sure to coordinate with staff to send out calendar holds for that. And just wanted to make a note,
based on our memo that we will be working in earnest with the Community Funding Partnership team and other interdisciplinary staff this year to make sure that we have equitable attention and balance in terms of our communications and outreach work across all of our river basins. And we will look forward to working with directors in each of their respective counties as we work towards State of the Rivers this spring and on our annual seminar for this fall. But with that, I will just open it up for questions that you might have from our EA or INO committee memos.
And directors, just keep your eyes out as we settle the dates for the various State of the Rivers. Of course, we will loop you all in immediately once those are settled.
I guess a question I have on Shoshone, will you be keeping us updated by email as things move forward and as you're figuring out the coalition partnerships and
yes,
funding opportunities and how people can send in their $50 checks?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Director and Madam Chair. Yes, our team will be working closely with GBSM, who is our strategic communications contractor, to make sure that all of our coalition partners, our directors, our staff, everyone is up to date as new events, milestones, messaging documents and things arise. We have a website that I also emailed you all the link for, and social media accounts that Lindsay has set up that are ongoing now to spread the word about the campaign. But we will be regularly updating you as news arises, and look forward to working with you all individually on that.
Speaking of news arising, the CWCB did publish their agenda this morning for their 29th, the meeting that is scheduled for January 29th. We are on the agenda from 1:55 to 2:55 in Aurora for our grant request of $20 million. For any of the directors and or your constituents or coalition partners who can be there, we would very much encourage you. CWCB has a process where you need to sign up to speak, ideally logging onto their webpage and finding the place to do so and indicating that you wish to speak on an agenda item. Theoretically, you can show up in person and they will put you on, but it is a little bit harder to do that than most public meetings. So if you can get on their website and log into that and sign up for it if you're going to be there, that would be fantastic. You can also appear virtually and sign up. We have asked our coalition partners to do their best to be there in person. You know, it's it is easier to say no to the River District, as we are occasionally inheritant to the CWCB, just because that's our statutory charge. It is important that the board understand that this is the district asking for these funds on behalf of the coalition of 18 or 19 local governments and water agencies. And so we think that we will see broad support at that meeting. But that's the next event that will be back on.
Great. And the link to the CWC's board meeting webpage with that link to a public comment request form and the instructions to do so are in that email as well. And it is item 10C on their agenda. So it's a heads up.
All right, thank you.
State affairs quickly. You should have seen an email yesterday with updated bills that have been introduced over the last week for your consideration and action today, or potential action. Before we dive into those, first I'll trust that you've read the memo in my update email from yesterday, which contains just update on what occurred during the first week at the Capitol. This also means that we are, staff would like to ask that the board continue its practice of bi-weekly legislative calls throughout the legislative session so that we can have updated positions on legislation impacting our water users in a timely manner. If we followed normal protocol, that would put our first meeting on February 1st, which unfortunately conflicts with Water Congress in Denver. So I think I'd like to offer to work with President Chandler Henry and leadership to figure out whether we can wait an additional week or just be in touch with you after we've adjourned here today about when the date and time of that meeting. But normally our meetings do occur on every other Thursday at noon. We try to be as quick as possible, have you out of there within an hour. And it would be a virtual call. That being said, if there are no questions, I can jump in on the 3 bills that I have for a position, requesting positions. The first is Senate Bill 005. This is the prohibition of certain landscaping practices for water conservation purposes. This is a Denver Water idea originally. I would like to thank our partners at Denver Water for keeping us in the loop as they went through multiple iterations prior to discussion with the interim committee. And ultimately, this bill did receive the necessary supermajority to advance from the interim Water Resources Committee to the General Assembly. Quickly, it essentially prohibits local governments or HOAs from installing, planting, or placing non-functional turf, artificial turf, or invasive species on commercial, institutional, or industrial properties or transportation corridors. It does not affect residential properties. It does not ban the use of artificial turf on playing fields. It has received a strong bipartisan show of support from the Capitol thus far. My recommended position here is to support this bill.
I just have one, Madam Chair. Who's gonna police this?
This would be, it's my understanding, it would
It's
be
just
on the
illegals.
local governments
Or
to enforce it.
Constituents. Yeah. You see it happening.
Call town hall, so.
Okay, thank you.
I'll move staff recommendation.
Okay, moved by Director Haas, in favor of staff recommendation, seconded by Dennison. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you. The second bill for your consideration is Senate Bill 026. This is also a interim committee bill brought forward by Senator Roberts. Essentially reinstates meeting requirements that lapsed after 2011 when the DOW and Parks and Recreation were combined into one agency. This would require that CWCB, Colorado Department of Ag, as well as Parks and Wildlife Commission hold at least 2 public in-person meetings each year. These are not formal hearings. It's my understanding that they would be more outreach opportunities to hear from their constituents in the state. Senator Roberts expressed his belief that these agencies need to be doing more to hear from their constituents, and that's the result of the bill. Or the bill is the result of his beliefs. And again, my position or my recommended position for the board is to support this bill.
A motion?
So moved, Director Chavez.
Second.
Staff recommendation moved by Chapman, second by Director Roca.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes.
I misspoke earlier when I said I had 3 bills for positions. The 3 remaining bills here, there were 5 total. I'm recommending we monitor for the time being. I don't need motions in order to or I don't need board instruction to monitor, but want to make sure you're up to speed on these. The first is a study bill for the use of green infrastructure or natural infrastructure for water quality management. It would be a CDPHE effort working alongside University of Colorado and Colorado State. I don't see any controversy here, but I also don't see a need for the district to engage actively on this bill. The second is one that I think we will need to engage on, but there's, I'll admit, staff needs a good amount of clarity. This is a request from Senator Simpson. I noted that it's a product of the Water Resources Review Committee, in that it came out of the interim efforts, but it was never discussed by the committee. It came about on the very last hearing from Senator Simpson. It involves some obscure conservancy districts that are organized under Articles 1 through 8 of Title 37. These are not your traditional water conservancy districts, but my review suggests that it is an effort to grant these conservancy districts some of the powers that traditional water conservancy districts typically maintain. If I'm putting two and two together, this is largely related to the need to get some more money out the door on well retirements in the San Luis Valley. There's a need to retire more wells. There's a significant amount of money that's waiting to be spent and has a certain timeline associated with it. My guess is the San Luis Valley needs some capacity to get some of these wells retired. I would like to maintain a position of monitor until we can work more closely with Senator Simpson to get down to the real nuts and bolts of what's at play here.
I'm sorry. I guess I think there's a pet project behind this somewhere as well. That's kind of my thought, so. But I think I need to know more because I've got questions as well, but I'll reserve those until this.
The bill is not scheduled for a hearing at this point. I think we have time to work with Senator Simpson and others to understand better what his needs are and if we can get to yes on this.
I just want to add that these conservancy districts that are being discussed here were set up for purposes of flood prevention. So they're not your typical water conservancy district.
Any other comments?
The last bill for your attention, but no position, is House Bill 1029. It's the prohibition of foreign ownership of agricultural and natural resources. We saw this bill last year from Representative Bradley. Once again, this bill does not have a Senate sponsor or a co-sponsor from the majority party in the House. Without the former or the latter in place, I don't see this bill moving forward. I suggest we monitor this for the time being. My assumption is it dies of its own weight.
See, any other questions? Or policy review?
Quickly, I have some federal affairs updates. Per usual, my federal affairs memo was out of date by the time it was submitted to you. Just this week, we've seen the US Senate propose a new continuing resolution. Of course, we saw on November 16th a CR that revived and extended the Farm Bill through September 30th of 24. This new CR proposal would avoid the staggered or laddered government shutdown that we're facing. I think day after tomorrow would be the first of the two shutdowns. The House Speaker has indicated as recently as this morning that he wants to continue to support an earlier spending cap agreement that he agreed to with the Senate Majority Leader. This is going to be a bit risky for him after his insistence in November that he does not want to pass any more short-term funding bills. It also makes the Farm Bill more problematic. It's a real mess out there by way of timelines right now. We had heard from the House Ag Chair this week that they were going to try, or last week, that they were going to try to begin moving a Farm Bill in March. The current CR allows it to continue existing at current funding levels till September. It's their assumption that it would take them from March to September to get it completed and done. This new CR approach could potentially interfere with those timelines. It also is leading some, I think Politico just yesterday reported that there are GOP lawmakers saying privately that they don't expect a Farm Bill to move until after the November elections, if it moves at all this Congress. A lame duck Farm Bill, however, would be a very heavy lift. So I'm sorry, I don't have more certainty for you, but it really is the budget discussions, the threats of a shutdown and these temporary extensions that continue to prevent real business from being done.
Zane, you may or may not know, but how is this not having a farm bill impacting the PL 566 program?
PL 566 under the current continuing resolution is funded at its existing levels. So there is no immediate impact. It does impact the agency's ability to look forward beyond September 30th. And not just NRCS, but other USDA agencies that are trying to plan for water users and projects more than a few months out. And so current subscriptions are not, or enrollments are not impacted, but it's those new projects that are coming forward. And that's on top of historic funding shortages at NRCS and within the agency as a whole, or within the department as a whole. So they have existing funding levels, but it's those future projects that are being
The comments on federal.
on to policies. All right, we've got a good number of policies for your review this year. As a reminder, it's the board's practice to revisit their board policies on a triennial basis. The board's self-imposed policy is that this will appear, that a policy should appear on an agenda at least twice before final before readoption or before making any changes final. The first one on your list this year, and it looks like Stephanie has them up on the screen if you don't have them in front of you, is agricultural water use. Staff has made some minor additions. My goal here during the first quarterly meeting is to hear your feedback, see if there are substantial or more substantive changes that need to be made. And really, I will follow the wishes of the committee.
Ag water use policy is at page 482.
That's Director Vandenberg.
I don't know if this fits in or not, but is there something that we could put in, because we've got a lot of new ag ranch owners, hobby ranch owners, how you want recreation ranch owner, or ranch owners, how you want non-traditional Colorado ranch owners coming in. They don't necessarily know how the system's been developed. Do we need to, would it be to our benefit to include, support and advocate agriculture, to visit with your neighbors, just to discuss secondary impacts? That's not the right words, trust me. But because we see to where if you change what you're doing for a voluntary temporary compensated type deal, that now my neighbor's well is dry. Or they're not getting the return flows down their ditch. That they were sharing water before. Is that something that we could feather in this thing here a little bit?
I'd be happy to spend some time between now and the next quarterly meeting trying to create some new language there. I will note, I struck a paragraph in the background and discussion related to efficiency and conservation measures because I saw it as redundant. Efficiency and conservation are noted within the River District and our need to evaluate those kinds of things. Potentially, to your point, maybe keeping that language that I struck, even if it is slightly redundant, might help to underscore what you're getting at.
Okay, so it seems to be falling in line with what we've got for, just Andy visited before about return flows, kind of what the impacts it has by going to so.
That occurred in my head as you were having that previous discussion that maybe I shouldn't have stricken that middle paragraph.
Thank you.
It might be helpful that you don't need to get into the, but it's helpful to see those in the paragraph.
I want to say, we're just identifying an issue. The red lines that are supposed to be on these policies did not make it into the packet. And so that's why you're not seeing them I don't know why that happened. I am gonna have to ask you to look up on the screen. Watch it. I apologize.
Read it. It's strange because
I can't read it. I apologize for that oversight. None of the changes are in the packet.
on your. It's strange because I'm pulling this directly from the packet.
Yeah, not in the packet. So.
Strange.
Is that, and the board doesn't see them in the packet?
Maybe the director and staff
Yeah,
packets are different.
staff and supports policies is here, it's just.
Yeah, it's not, it's as if the changes were all accepted
Right.
and they're not in there. So all the paragraphs that you deleted.
That makes so much more sense now.
Yes. Because I was like, what? You didn't make any of the changes I put in there.
Okay, trying to think of how we mean this. The last bullet point here is the most substantive change to this addition by staff to this policy for your consideration. It reads that the River District supports policies and actions that protect local water resources and communities from the adverse impacts of transfers of West Slope water out of the region for the benefit of other areas within the state of Colorado or the larger Colorado River Basin. That was something council and general manager felt strongly about. I don't know, Andy, that it's gonna be a good use of our time to go by the.
I was just gonna say, hey.
I'm happy to revisit it next quarter too.
Just looking at the snow outside, is policies have to be approved after 2 meetings. We could
I'm okay.
just move this to the April meeting to April and July.
And I can email my comments,
Yeah.
but I have quite a few on the policies
Great.
that I'd be happy to email to Zane and then he could have it and.
Why don't I send this document with the red lines to you all so that I know what you have has all of my changes and all proposed revisions.
Thank you very much.
And then we'll come back and visit this.
All right,
Well, that was
Good job.
All right, thanks, guys.
thank you.
Nicely done, now we're ahead of time. Love that. All right,
Okay.
great.
Project and operation updates. We have a water marketing policy. Is Hunter in the room? Hunter. Hey, Hunter.
Didn't expect to be on.
I know. The water marketing policy, Ian and Don as well. They, any of them? Ian's here. Maybe Ian can take it.
Hunter was gonna take it for me.
Wow.
It's not my plan.
You guys can do it.
Is it afternoon yet? Good afternoon, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, okay. So here to talk about the water marketing pricing for 2024. As a little background, we kind of have 2 buckets of water contracts. We have a pre-2006 bucket and a post-2006 bucket. We're just talking about the post-2006 pricing today. That pricing gets updated every year, whereas the pre-2006 pricing gets updated for the O&M component every 5 years. We just increased that in 2023, so those are due for an increase in 2028. So today, the post-2006 contracts, staff is proposing an increase of 6.2%. Now, the board has the ability to increase prices up to CPI plus the net growth index. This year, the CPI, the projected CPI at the time of writing this was 5%, and the net growth was 1.22%. So those combined are 6.22. We're recommending an increase of 6.2%. We have a section in the memo highlighting the importance of the in-channel leases, as Andy discussed earlier today. Without those in-channel leases, our end water sales are relatively stagnant. Since 2019, those in-channel leases have brought in 1.3 million and as much as 24% of annual water sales for a given year. We're still facing increased operating costs. And unless it's the board's desire to subsidize those costs, we intend to pass on those increases to our contractees. So open it up for any questions anybody has. Fortunately, I don't think Dawn is here today, so if there's any questions about supply, maybe Hunter can take a stab at them.
Thank you. A quick clarifying question on page 2 of 5 of the water marketing memo. In the far right, it says proposed 2023 pricing. I assume that was supposed to be 2024?
Yes.
Okay, just.
Sorry, thank you.
No, I just wanted to make sure I was.
Can you explain again the NGI net growth index, a measure of annual property value stemming from new growth? And so why, so that's all for new contracts or it's all for the existing contracts as well?
Existing, that figure comes from a state worksheet that we used to have to produce every year under Tabor. And it just takes that net growth and those values, those valuations. So that's what that component is, but that is a part of the overall increase to all of our contract holders. So
Into the contract form that's been approved by this.
So they signed the contract that had these two things in here. And again,
Everybody after 2006 has signed a contract that says that this board has the ability to increase the price.
CPI plus NGI.
Yes.
I've never seen NGI before. New concept. Okay. So you get a motion.
I've mentioned this the last couple of years and I guess I'm a little bit, the market value is something that's based on supply and demand. And in some of these reservoirs, we have plenty of supply, but we have very little demand. And just to automatically keep raising the rate, thinking, well, if we do lease some, we want to come out good, but if we don't lease some, but you have an opportunity cost too that's lost. So I know like out of Elkhead, I don't see it in this, but I believe we have the ability to negotiate with somebody comes to us and says, hey, I'd like to lease some water. We have that ability, is that correct?
Peter, Jason?
Yeah,
I mean,
but
we at staff would have to get the board approved.
Yeah, certainly. So, are we just, is that the right thing to do? Is just say, well, we don't have a lot of demand here. We don't want to give our resources away, so we're going to step with inflation, but we're not leasing any water. At what point do we correct that, or should we?
The rates for the leasing of the water go back into a capital reserve or the replacement of something and the operation and maintenance of the system, right? And I think those costs are increasing. So personally, I see it as being important that we do keep up with the cost of inflation so that we can maintain infrastructure that we have.
Well, and Director Taylor, that I think that's correct. I would say, however, if we don't lease any of the water, which I think is.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't keep up very good.
We're not keeping up in that cost and we're just bearing them all ourselves. I think what this raises is just a broader question. You know, we have a marketing policy, water marketing policy. Staff is following the policy.
Yeah.
David's. Is this, if it's the direction of the board, we could come back with some form of, flash sale, blue light special kind of thing. We could try to stoke some interest in the water by proposing a discounted value at some point, if that makes sense. I'd really want some economic analysis done on what that would look like and why we would do that. I understand, I will say, we have tried with in-channel uses in a number of creative ways to stoke some interest in our water so that we can actually get.
We've actually given some away.
We've even given it away as a lost leader. That's
Yes.
right. That's in an effort to, again, show the value of stored water and therefore try to encourage people to someday pay us for it, right? That's the idea. Now, what I hear, and Tom, I don't mean to pick on your basin, but the last time I had some discussions with producers was up in your basin. When calls started coming on, and the ag users up there all said, well, we can't afford your ag rate, so that doesn't help us. That, you know, and while I appreciate that, they can't afford the ag rate, in reality, I'm not sure we can afford below the ag rate, because that, you know,
Fair
it's
enough. I had a conversation with that same person and I said, you know what? It's costing me that much to pump water on my field. So if you can't afford it, that's your decision, but that's not out of line on the ag rate.
Yeah, on the ag rate.
On the ag rate.
Other rates make it.
But it goes back to, you know, would we rather have 100% of the rate we can get or 0% of the rate we wish we could get?
And do we know, is that generally the reason people don't buy water, is the cost, or are there a variety of?
Probably a variety.
It's the cost and it's also demand. I mean, just, do they need it? But
Well, I was just gonna say, it's in large part demand. If we could have charged 10, 15 times what we were charging people for wholesale supply in 2002 through 2003, 4, when everybody all of a sudden realized they didn't have a secure water supply. But we didn't, but we could have. So, you know, there's another, there's a flip side of going to the more market focus.
So I guess I'm all right with the 6.2 increase. And again, especially relating the fact that the ag is already discounted so much that it already is. And my Upper Yampa has the same problem. I mean, we have 0 water out of Stagecoach water that goes to ag because nobody can afford it. I mean, seriously, if you don't have historical pre-compact water, you're not irrigating. You're waiting on Mother Nature to irrigate it for you. So I'm all right with the money. And if people are gonna bring in an industry that needs to have water, I mean, hopefully they can accommodate having the water and pay for that water, whatever. And again, these things are depreciable and they're not gonna last forever and we have to repair them too. So the reservoirs, and hopefully it's going into a fund that we can take care of it. So I'm kind of all right with the 6.2 increase. And again, especially based on the fact that we have such a sizable discount on the ag, so I guess.
you're suggesting we should, what I think I just heard is we should try to undercut Upper Yampa and see if we can, sort of, not just kidding.
It don't matter.
It doesn't matter, we're already doing that, we're not getting customers, so, yeah.
Can you run a pipe?
Oh, over your back, base.
Would you be willing to consider bringing it back with, when we have time to think about it, with something creative and just give us a chance to, 'cause I don't know the right answer here.
Right, I'm not sure I do, and I, flippantly said the blue light special, but I do, is there some way we can?
Some creative way to create some leases.
Still gotta treat everybody alike somehow, so is that reflective back on old people that you've been doing business, well, we've been overcharging you, so. Yeah, so I don't know.
We don't have any of that. So we don't have any old people that's been leasing.
We don't in the Yampa, but we do out of.
It's other places. So maybe it needs to be based on where the supply and demand is more balanced.
And we'll work on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm saying, let's not just throw it under the bus one more year and let's take a look at least. Maybe we won't do anything.
I think we'd ask that the board approve this proposal, but that we take your direction to come back with more creative.
Okay, fair enough.
That's what I would add.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
So I move staff recommendation.
Motion by Munger,
I'll second.
second by Gray. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That discussion is good.
All right, now, sorry.
No, it's fine. Did you see the sweat coming down my head? Well, thank you, directors. I'll be summarizing a memo on page 500 of your PDF. It provides an update on an upcoming comprehensive dam safety evaluation and also includes 2 contract requests. So as a little bit of a background and refresher, at the October board meeting, I provided an update that we were going to be conducting a comprehensive dam safety evaluation in November of last year. Comprehensive dam safety evaluation, or CDSE, as the name implies, it's essentially a kind of a big picture look at a dam's risk profile. it works by looking at the dam and essentially imagining all the possible ways that it could fail. It's kind of a nerve-wracking process, but it's really helpful for evaluating risks. So you look at all those possible ways it could fail, and you come up with a chain of events that would, if they came in sequence, would result in a dam failure, and you estimate the probability of each of those, and you end up coming out of that process with a report that describes the probability of the dam failing. It's kind of an industry standard process. It's very common for high hazard dam owners to undertake this process. So we were gonna do that in November of last year, but we wanted some ongoing seismic hazard analysis. So we've decided, in coordination with our subject matter experts, our partners in the water, the Dam Safety Office, to postpone that until March and April of this coming year. A little bit more background. We last conducted one of these in 2020, and this will be an update to that. One of the outcomes of that 2020 CDSE was a report that had a number of recommendations. We've been working diligently on those, completed them, and now we're at a point that to undertake that evaluation with a lot more informed information. So that's kind of a background on that. My first request is for a contract request for additional seismic hazard analysis. This came out of the 2020 CDSE report that recommended that we undertake slope stability analysis. I won't get into the details of that, but part of that was looking at the likelihood of the dam failing due to a nearby earthquake. Our consultant HDR conducted that analysis, and after reviewing that analysis, our subject matter experts recommended that we undertake additional seismic hazard analysis that's more in depth and more site specific. Essentially, the results that HDR came up with were a little bit too borderline and not, they didn't have enough confidence in those. So we've been working with Gannett Fleming initially under a general manager's authority, and then we came to the board in October for a second phase of that study, and now we're coming back for a third phase. Hopefully the final phase, and it'll at least be the final phase before this upcoming CDSE. So we'll conduct this third phase of the seismic hazard analysis. That'll help inform us as we're going through that CDSE, so that we can evaluate the risk of earthquake-induced failure. Any questions on that contract request before I move to the next one? All set? Okay, so my second request is for
Maybe the board.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there a motion?
Sure.
We have a staff recommendation to amend an existing contract with, Fleming, and to authorize the general manager to execute that.
Is this a request of the state that you complete this, or a suggestion of contractors and subject matter experts?
It was a recommendation by our subject matter experts, but we've been involving dam safety in all of this.
Understand. How do you feel about doing this?
I think it's worthwhile based on what HDR came up with. And yeah, I think we need to do as much as we can to reduce the uncertainty.
That's what I'm looking for, because it's not a mandate from the state, but a suggestion. And this is up to the dam owner, whether they move forward to it. So that's why I want you're the dam safety coordinator for us.
Yeah.
Give us your recommendations. And I get your recommendation, but are you standing behind it?
Yeah.
Like you're indicating, or just saying this is what our contractors say we want to do?
Yeah, I am leaning on their expertise, but I also do think this is a worthwhile undertaking.
Just be cautious with your contractors, because they like coming back and asking for more. And
Yeah.
this is their livelihood.
Yeah, it is.
He receives that oversight advice.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
Did I overstep myself?
No, not at all. I'm glad to know we're in agreement.
Okay.
That you need to understand who's advising you to take certain things. You'll note the advice on this matter, just to be clear, came from folks that do not economically benefit the work that's been done. So we do have a separation, but I am concerned about
As
supporting a self funding industry of consultants. So,
Thank you, Hunter, very much. I will make the motion to approve the recommendation for Gauntlet Fleming contract request. Gannett, I see it. Gannett Fleming.
Moved by Vandenbrink.
Second by Monger.
Right, now
Thank
you
you.
jump into the concessionaire.
Perfect. So the second request relates to the recreation area at Wolford Mountain Reservoir. As a little background for newer directors, we own the campground and recreation area at Wolford Mountain Reservoir. But we operate it through a concessionaire, at least for kind of the busier recreation season. We have been operating it through our concessionaire Pass Creek Investment since 2020. So it was initially under a 3-year contract. We actually updated it last January for 2 years. And then the concessionaire has requested a 5-year extension to that contract. Pass Creek has done an excellent job. They've demonstrated their ability to do great work. They interact well with the public up there. I really view it as a partnership. They've also helped us achieve some of our goals. One of our goals has been to reduce the ongoing costs of the recreation area. In the past, it's been kind of a time suck for our employees up there. There's always stuff that comes up, and we've been working with the concessionaire to try to reduce our staff time at the recreation area and take those responsibilities on with them and their staff. And they've been helpful in achieving that. I'm not requesting any major contract changes. Essentially just a new contract based on the old one. But I do want to use this as an opportunity to improve the contract. So for one, I want to clarify roles some. There's a lot of stuff just day to day from cleaning and maintenance. And it can be a little bit challenging to delineate those specific roles, but I think we do a little bit better job with this contract to make sure it's really clear who does what and who's responsible for what maintenance and that sort of thing. I'd also like to use this as an opportunity to provide a little flexibility for cost adjustments, especially with a 5-year contract. Everyone here knows how much labor costs have increased. And in particular, the concessionaire is responsible for our aquatic nuisance species program. So they hire the certified ANS inspectors, and they operate that program. And over the past few years, labor costs have increased. So we've been needing to do some amendments to adjust for that. So hoping this contract can allow us some flexibility to adjust for labor inflation. Overall, I think a longer lease benefits both parties. It allows Pass Creek some certainty. It allows them to invest more in their operations. And it gives us the opportunity to maintain that partnership. So that's the request, is for a 5-year contract with Pass Creek Investments. Before I move on, this is a little bit to the side, but there are some upcoming capital improvements up there. We have some docks on the reservoir. It's a pretty harsh environment and they're approaching their end of life. So we'll probably be coming back to the board either with a request or through budget planning for replacing or repairing those docks. I also wanted to mention that the playground equipment up there is original from construction. It's kind of got a nice retro feel, but it's also kind of looks at its age. So we're looking into putting in some new playground equipment. And so no action on that. I just wanted to give the board heads up.
Questions for him too? No.
Hunter, is there any opportunity for the state of Colorado to come in and help partially pay for your ANS services?
We've had some conversations with him about that. Yeah.
How's that week?
And we'll keep having those.
Do
Yeah.
they, run decontamination up there?
We do. Yeah, we have a decon unit that our concessionaire operates. Honestly, that alone is kind of costly. They are prone to turning into flamethrowers and yeah, they're tricky to maintain. Yeah, this one's the hydroblaster. What is it?
Yeah, I do, the question is, the state is now collecting significant funds from voters to do ANS monitoring. They are, for instance, the state and the feds are coming in to cover costs that we've been covering up at Rudai on the ANS program. And so the question is, can we get some help from the state fund at Wolford? And we are looking at that.
And we have received some funds for them. There's, is it 10,000? Yeah. So we implemented a fee for decontamination. People come in with dirty boats, and it ends up taking a lot of our concessionaire staff time. So we implemented a fee. CPW didn't like that because then people just were all going up Green Mountain to get a free cleaning. So we worked with them and they've started chipping in. There's a little bit of horse trading there.
Yeah, I saw the writing on the wall when that one happened. So, all right,
Director Chavez.
thank you.
I'm not sure what you guys are thinking about in terms of the playground equipment, but maybe there's an opportunity for a GoCo grant or something like that.
Yeah, we started looking into that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we have a staff recommendation to authorize the general manager to execute a 5-year agreement with Pass Creek. You have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Director Bouchard,
Second.
Vandenbrink, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Take it down to
We got Eden Park Reservoir.
And they said we're at. Even at Avery.
Hi, good afternoon, directors. The last enterprise topic is for approval of a contract for Eagle River Supplies. The Upper Eagle Regional Water Authority has requested 50 acre feet of supplies out of our Eagle River marketable supplies. Our board policy says that anything above 20 acre feet in the Eagle River supply, out of the Eagle River supplies requires board approval, and thus we are bringing this to you guys. We currently have 120, almost 122 acre feet of available marketable supplies. We have a total of 430 acre feet up there, 120 is left. So the 50 acre foot request is clearly within the available supplies. This is coming to you guys for approval.
Staff,
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
okay, moved by Munger, second by Dennison, all those in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you. Last item on the agenda, Madam President, is just a quick discussion about future meetings. Our lunch is actually coming. It's not quite here yet. There are boxes, so if people want to eat while they drive, they can do that. Just real quickly, our regular meetings are all on this calendar. What's not on the future meetings on the agenda is our weekly legislative calls. Just to reiterate what Zane said earlier, every other Thursday. Zane, starting when?
We did it. I'd like to work with you and President Chandler Henry to figure out if the meetings can start.
If the what?
2 weeks from tomorrow would be February 1st.
Okay.
But that is directly in the middle of Water Congress. Many here will be in the luncheon at Water Congress at noon. My suggestion is we start on the 8th, but I'm happy to work with President Chandler.
The 8th work with the board. And you don't think we're gonna miss any bills that are flying through the legislature?
The only things calendared in the Senate at the moment are, we have positions on those.
If it works for you, we will start those on the 8th and then every other Thursday. I would just remind the board that if you're out talking to your constituents, this is an opportunity for our constituents to contact Stephanie. You all have her email. She can get them on an email distribution list for Zane's legislative memo, which allows our constituents to benefit from the analysis and attention that our district pays to the legislature. And so they can read the memo and then they can show up to our meeting virtually. And if they so choose, provide you with some input. I will tell you, in meeting with partners on Shoshone, been reminding them of this upcoming legislative session. And I think it's important for you as a board to make sure we're hearing from constituents who are interested in. By getting that word out to our constituents that we're doing this, it also helps maybe preempt a desire to, I think a lot of our constituents sometimes forget that the River District does this and was actually formed to represent the West Slope on these issues. And so occasionally, and if you look back over history as I do, there are these swells of desire to go start a new organization that maybe will represent the West Slope on legislative issues, or a part of the West Slope on legislative issues on water. And it would be great to make sure that we continue to be effective by speaking with one voice, the River District's voice, your constituents' voice. So trying to make sure our constituents know about this would be really helpful. And if they're interested, they're public meetings, they can listen, they can contribute, they can get, as I said, copies of Zane's memos. It's just we do have constituents who are interested. They don't always speak, but they do read the stuff. And so let them know that this is going on, please. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, you know, it's an hour meeting, not to make sure that maybe we put that towards the back of it so that we can get the material we need as a board from that meeting. I've got a constituent in Grand Junction, you know of, and I know of, she would be happy to participate and give us her opinion, and she tends to over talk the chairperson.
Frankly, our chair has an iron fist, so.
So watch out what we asked for, and I know we did last year, but this is for the board's benefit.
It is.
I get them listening and stuff, but I think that there's probably some that would like to think they're part of this board and would like to. So I just hope we have a strong.
Are you talking about Commissioner Linke who sat at the table during the signing?
Well, it could happen pretty easily out of my county.
I appreciate what you're saying. I think it's important. I mean, all I'm suggesting with the way we conducted them last year is that we staff presents on the legislative issue. The board then opens it up for any public comment, and then the board discusses and takes a position. If public comment gets to be too long, I have great confidence in our leader that she will make sure that somebody who talks too much is not gonna.
I just want tight control of me.
We do have a mute button on Zoom. Yeah, Director Chavez and then.
Just with regard to future meetings, wanted to make sure that folks knew that the Water Quality Control Commission was going to be meeting with the Colorado Water Conservation Board in a joint meeting on that Tuesday, January 30th at 12:30 p.m. And so that could be a good time just to listen in and hear those conversations, hear conversations about WOTUS, and then provide any input even about the permit program if you wanted.
Thank you.
And Director Haas.
Yeah, I'm just curious, are we gonna get a final count tally of our committees?
Yes.
More surprises?
We will email that out. There are no 7:30 a.m. meetings tomorrow.
Okay, good.
Okay, so.
Phew. No, I might be here, so.
With the president's permission, we'll email those out.
That's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Just remind everybody that the budget workshop and annual seminar have been set for September 19th and 20th. The agenda says they're TBD, but we just did get confirmation from CMU on that. They will be held at Colorado Mesa University. The river, we are setting those State of the River meetings. We didn't mention it too thoroughly when the EA staff was up here. At my request, they increased the number from last year, which is primarily making sure that we're performing sufficient outreach in all of our river basins. So trying to make sure that people hear from us. If you can all, we will let you know when those get scheduled, and we would love to see you each and all present at those basin roundtable or at those basin meetings, state of river meetings. With that, Steph, is lunch still on the way?
Yes.
Yes, it's not quite here yet. You are finished. I want to say 33 minutes early.
The non-red line.
Okay, we are officially adjourned. Thank you all. Great participation. Thanks staff for a great meeting.